We will call the meeting to order. Claire, if we can please have a roll call.
Vice Chair Fuller,
Here.
DeLomo,
Here.
Littman, Ashkenazi, Shimura,
Here.
DeGenero,
Here.
Fugielli,
Here.
Linesky,
Here.
Caramanica, Chairwoman Beal.
Here. Okay, we will stand to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. The notice requirements of the open public meeting law for this meeting have been satisfied. A copy of the notice having been sent to the Asbury Park Press and the Coaster and filed in the office of the Township Clerk. There is an emergency exit through the courtroom doors and 2 exits at the rear of the room. There will be no smoking, no new cases will be started after 9 o'clock p.m., and no new testimony taken after 9:30 p.m. In addition, the applicant will be limited to 45 minutes of testimony. All meetings will be video and audio taped and shown on the Township of Ocean's Community Cable Channel, Channel 22 on Verizon Fios, and Channel 77 on Cablevision. All cell phones must be turned off, or if you need to make a call, please make your call outside of the meeting room. We have the September 18th, 2024 minutes for approval, and I think I will offer, because I'm sure I was here. Okay.
A second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have a resolution for memorialization. Michelle Lanza, Block 39.01, Lot 1, 600 Bound Road, Ocean, 07712.
I'll offer. A second.
Vice Chair Fuller,
Yes.
Shimura,
Yes.
DeGenero,
Yes.
Fugielli,
Yes.
That's it. Okay. We have another amended resolution for memorialization. Matthew Bilboa, Block 140, Lot 64, 1202 Logan Road, Ocean, 07712.
I'll offer. I'll second.
Vice Chair Fuller,
Yes.
DeLomo,
Yes.
Shimura,
Yes.
Linesky,
Yes.
Fugielli,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Fuller, Vice Chairwoman Beal. No, Chairwoman Beal.
Yes. Okay, we have a denial of bulk variance for Emerald Jade LLC, Block 62, Lot 4, 515 Myrtle Avenue, West Allenhurst, 07711.
I'll offer.
Second.
I'm sorry, misplaced my paper. Shimura,
Yes.
DeGenero,
Yes.
Fugielli,
Yes.
Vice Chair Fuller,
Yes.
Okay, denial of bulk variance for IAAT Services LLC, Block 34, Lot 12, 1700 New Jersey State Highway 35, Ocean, 07712.
I'll offer.
This was the billboards. This is the denial of the D1, D2, D3, D6, and bulk variances.
Okay.
Because it was non-permitted use, possible conditional use, height variance, expansion of a non-conforming use, all those things.
Okay.
So, and bulk.
Vice Chair Fuller,
Yes.
Shimura,
Yes.
DeGenero,
Yes.
Fugielli,
Yes.
Linesky,
Yes.
Okay, the following application has been withdrawn without prejudice. Sammy Haber, Block 67, Lot 8, 507 Stafford Street, West Allenhurst, 07711. The following is a request for cases to be carried to December 19th, 2024, and the board will discuss if new noticing is required. IAAT Services, LLC, 1418 Highway 35, Oakhurst, 07755, Zone 0-140. Can we do them both or okay? IAAT Services LLC 922 Highway 35 Ocean 07712 Zone C5.
I'll offer that both cases be carried to the 19th of December with new notice.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Excuse me. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the next case to be heard, Abraham and Margaret Moseri, Block 76, Lot 2, 491 South Edgemere Ave, West Allenhurst, 07711, Zone R5. Attorney is Jennifer Krimko. The applicant proposes to construct 2-story side and rear additions, second floor addition, and install a raised rear patio. Minimum front yard setback 30 feet required, 10.77 feet to second story front cantilever, 12.35 feet to 2-story side addition and second floor addition proposed. Minimum side yard setback 15% of lot width or 14.22 feet required, 5.8 feet 2-story rear addition and second floor addition proposed. Minimum rear yard setback 30 feet required, 7.30 feet to second floor addition, 11.87 feet to 2-story rear addition, 13.81 feet to second floor rear cantilever proposed. Maximum lot coverage building, 25% of total lot area permitted, 33.01% proposed. Accessory structures including patios must maintain required 10-foot rear yard setback, 3 feet to raised patio proposed. Minimum driveway side yard setback, 5 feet required, 2.5 feet to extended driveway proposed.
Good evening, members of the board. Jennifer Krimko on behalf of the applicant. Some of you may have been here. I actually think a majority of you were here for the initial application, which, as you know, this board denied. And we're going to, since this is a new application, we're going to go through all of the testimony again anew. There have been some substantial changes not only to the application, but the circumstances around the application, and that the zone has actually changed. At the last application, coverage was based on buildable lot area, and now the ordinance has changed and coverage is based on the gross lot area, and a different coverage is permitted. As you may remember, those of you that were here, and for those of you that weren't, you're going to hear through the testimony tonight. We have a lot that is significantly encumbered by wetlands, flood hazard, as well as a very odd shaped lot. It is the quintessential example of a hardship case, in that I think one of the board members at the first hearing had indicated the only thing that would fit on this lot without any variances is a toll booth. So we have a single family home. The board objected to primarily the volume of the structure as it addressed the street, in that what was originally proposed was a full 2 stories at the existing non-conforming setback, which put the front wall of the house full 2 stories all the way at the front. And the board found it was out of character. As you're going to hear, we manipulated the architecture in a way quite positively, which enabled us to keep the character of the front of the house. What do I mean by that? As you're going to hear, the front porch that extends across the front, which is the closest to the street, is remaining intact. Previously, it was going to be filled in partially with a 2-story addition. Secondly, there's a main gable dormer, as you're going to hear from the architect, that really establishes the character of this craftsman house. That is being maintained. And the addition that is now being proposed is all set back and stepped back from that. Importantly, one of the neighbors, I think, who lived across the street, despite the fact that there's a clear view across, objected to anything essentially being in his view shed, and certainly objected to a full 2 story at 27 feet, even though the permitted is 35. Well, we took that to heart, and as you're gonna see on this revised plan, the section that is extending to the north is significantly smaller in height than what was there. There were a lot of variances. I just want to put it into context. This is a waterfront property, so the rear property line is somewhat of a fiction in that there is no rear yard neighbor at all. So if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, I'd like to just introduce a few exhibits, unless you'd like to do Jim and Ben's reports first. I'll defer to you.
Let's mark the packet.
Yes, clear. And then the exhibit.
Jim's report is not here tonight. So I don't know how you want it. You're not prepared. Yeah, but I didn't write the report. You didn't write the report.
May I suggest, Madam Chair, if it's okay with you and the board, perhaps we can go forward and then we can discuss anything in the reports. I mean, Jim's report was generally favorable.
That's fine.
Okay, and one other thing I wanted to point out, and I apologize, the last time we came, one of the questions that the board had was what's the character of the neighborhood, and as you're gonna see from an exhibit, and it's gonna be presented by a professional planner, 61% of the lots within this neighborhood, and you're gonna see it's a 1, 2, 3 block section, are non-conforming as to building coverage. I know that was important because we were looking at it in a vacuum, and we only gave lot sizes, so as you're gonna hear today, this is entirely consistent with what the makeup of this very mixed neighborhood is. So to start, and I'm sorry for such a long opening, but I think it's important to catch up some of the board members that didn't have the benefit of being here for the first hearing. A1 will be the plot plan prepared by French and Perillo, dated 4/12/24. A2 will be the architectural plans prepared by Thomas Lavin Architect, dated 4/8/24. A3, and I have copies to hand out, is an aerial view with the plot plan in color, overlaid on the aerial, so you can see the context and particularly see the vacant municipal lot to the north. A4 is just a close-up plot, color rendered plot plan. A5 is a color annotated tax map of the 3 blocks that I referenced, block 74, 73, and 78, which is essentially the vicinity of this neighborhood. I'll let the planner, when he testifies, explain what the color coding is. A6 is a street view looking to the south. A7 is a photo of the house immediately to our south, which I note just because I know that the owner was somewhat vocal. It has a building coverage in excess of 33.1%, and will testify to. And I share this because there were questions with regard to when we gave testimony as it related to the square footage of the buildings. They said, well, what were the lot sizes? We need to compare apples to apples. And then lastly, A8 is a 2-page photo exhibit downloaded from Google Earth, and it's to give the context of the neighborhood, which the board also was asking for. There's two houses, across the street to the southwest. The house adjacent to the one I just sent to you, and on the other page, the house leading into the neighborhood, and the house is at the end of the street. And again, it's just to give you some context. So with all of that, I'd like to call Keith Smith and just have him walk through existing and proposed.
Okay, if you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
Yes,
Okay, and you've testified before this board before.
yes, I have.
And you're testifying in your capacity as a licensed professional engineer.
Yes, I have.
Okay. And again, I think I gave an overview. If we could just start going into the details of what's existing on the lot today, what the constraints are by way of the lot size, the topography, and the features existing on the site, such as the water and the relative constraints to that.
Certainly. So the property itself is undersized in that the existing lot is 5,280 square feet, whereas 7,500 square feet is required in the drawing. It's already existing non-conforming lot by its size. To the, east of the property, the rear of the building itself is Deal Lake, and a slope which rises from Deal Lake up to the property itself.
Keith, may I suggest that you use A3 for purposes of this? Just to, because I think,
As I was saying, to the east of the lot is the Deal Lake and a slope that rises up to the rear of the property. There are, the wetlands in this area are considered state open water. We have received approvals from the DEP for that. There is, to the north of the lot is the existing township property. To the south of the lot is a 5-foot wide Ocean Township property, which is, and to further south is the adjacent property on lot 4.
okay, and looking at A4, what you moved in, and you have a bunch of lines there, and that shows a riparian buffer, which the existing house extends into, but which all of the addition kind of needs to stay clear of, correct?
Yes, there is a 50-foot riparian buffer, which is applied to, it's a vegetative buffer applied to all water bodies in the state, and you have to stay out the first 25 feet.
Okay, and that's kind of why, you know, our addition, you located it in such a way to keep it away from that riparian buffer. It kind of had to go along that diagonal line that runs kind of
Yes.
left to right.
It's shown in green on the reduced copy that you have, and yes,
Okay, and if I can ask you to just pull up now your A4. In the light color in the front, and I know we're gonna go through the architect, that's the existing front porch, correct?
yes,
And we're not proposing to construct anything above it, we're just going to leave that front porch as it is, addressing the front.
yes, correct.
Okay, and then you have pink, which indicates just a little portion of a second floor that is going to bump out, which the architect will go over. And then the rest of the addition is all back at the setback, where if the board looks on the left, it says about 12.53.
5.3 feet.
So it's all in line. So essentially, we pulled back any second-story addition as far as possible to keep it out of the streetscape, so to speak, and to maintain the character of the front.
Yes,
Okay, and in order to make up for some of the space that was lost, we are essentially converting the existing one-car garage into living space. And in order to do that, in order to meet the parking requirement, we were required to extend that driveway.
correct.
Okay, and I see that you have an area that's shaded a little bit lighter back by what was the existing one-story garage. That's the portion that we're extending, and that's the portion that's just gonna be in line, and that's what needs the variance.
Correct.
Okay. And as it relates to the second story addition, over the garage, obviously the front yard setback meets that. I'd indicated that if we were to construct a conforming house on this lot, can you outline, I know that you have a dashed triangle on there that
Yes.
shows where the permitted footprint would be, but if you could show that?
So basically, if you apply all the setbacks required by the zone, there is a small triangular piece which is left, which would be conforming for development.
So obviously, it would be impossible to build a house that would be livable here. And we'll talk to the architect and the planner as to the character of the neighborhood and whether or not what's being proposed fits in. So we're essentially not exacerbating the front setback. While we need a variance, we're still behind where the existing house is and we're leaving the open front porch.
Correct.
And the second story addition to the north is we're at, I'm just looking at your plan. That side yard setback would essentially conform there.
Yes, it's 30.47 feet.
Okay, so that one-story addition, as it relates to the side yard, and importantly, as we hear from testimony later, as it relates to filling in that open yard, that conforms as to side yard setback.
Yes,
Okay, and then the rest of it is really building to the back, which would have no impact on the neighbors, as well as building above the existing.
correct.
Okay, so, and the front steps are staying the same, everything else is staying the same. So as it relates to building coverage, we'd indicated 25% is permitted, we are proposed at what?
Building coverage, 33.01.
Okay, and as it relates to impervious coverage, we're well under what's permitted.
Correct.
Okay, so what's permitted and what are we proposed at?
Permitted is 65% of the total lot, and we are at 45.11.
Okay, and did you have an opportunity to review Ben's letter?
Yes,
Okay. Was there anything in his letter that was problematic or that if the board would approve this, we couldn't comply with?
no, not at all. There was one statement about the stormwater, which we can comply with. Basically, it's such a small increase in impervious, we could just put a pipe in the ground and carry that.
Okay. Recognizing that we have the architect and a planner to testify, are there any questions relative to engineering?
Doesn't seem like it.
Okay. Shall we wait for the public until after all the witnesses go? I'll defer to you, Madam Chair.
How did we do it last time, Mr. Steinberg? Do you recall if we?
But sometimes
When is it
We'll do it now then. Okay. Any
everything's fresh.
any questions from the public just for the engineer, Mr. Smith? Okay. If you can go. Oh, if
Yeah,
you
go
can
ahead, keep
share
it
the
before.
microphone.
And Madam Chair, I would just ask if you could remind the public that this is just for questions as it relates to what he testified to, not statements.
If you do you mind letting them hold the microphone, the gentleman there, and then we'll go to them. And if you can state your name and your address.
My name is Earl Jackson. I live at 503 Laurel Ave, across the street from the property.
Okay, and you have a question for the engineer.
I have a question for the engineer. I've reviewed the submission documents, and I understand the importance of the riparian corridor and the preservation of that. I understand that the proposal meets the corner of the limit of that riparian 25-foot setback, but I would like to ask why your recognition of where that line starts is different than the prior surveys that were conducted for the property by two other surveyors.
The line as shown on the plan is based on the submission and approval from the DEP.
Okay, so my question is, why does your line, recognizing the top of bank, vary from two prior surveys that register the top of bank where the top of bank actually is?
Madam Chair, he doesn't have those surveys. They're not in evidence. And
They are in
how
evidence.
they're not in evidence right now. And how another surveyor established a top of bank is not as relevant as who has jurisdiction to determine it, which is the DEP. So another surveyor may have placed it somewhere, but it wasn't approved by the DEP. This type of bank is approved by the DEP, who is the only agency that has jurisdiction over it.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have another question?
Not a question.
Miss, I believe you had your hand up. If you can come to the microphone. And if you can state your name and your address.
Nancy Flanagan, 507 Beechwood Avenue, West Allenhurst.
And you have a question for this engineer.
Yes, sir. You made the statement, no impact to the neighbors in the neighborhood. Would you explain that, please?
He didn't make that statement. The
Yes.
attorney made that statement.
Came out of his mouth.
It did not.
Okay. Do you have a statement?
He's not a
for that?
planner, so he can't
Okay.
opine to that.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Well,
This
let me
engineer?
follow up with that question. From an engineering perspective, is there any negative impact to the neighborhood? From a drainage,
Not in my opinion.
thank you.
Okay. Any other
Just
And-
now it was said, yes, it was.
Any other questions from the public for this engineer? Okay, so we can move on to the next.
Thank you. I'd like to
expert.
call Tom Lavin.
And if you can, oh,
Tom, grab that mic if you don't mind. Seems my witnesses tonight are a lot more soft-spoken than I am.
okay, Mr. Lavin, if you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Okay, and you have testified before this board
Yes, I
before?
have.
All right. Tom, you had heard my summary in the beginning where it indicated that the addition is observing the front porch. So just on your proposed first floor plan, could you point out the front porch existing and in the proposed?
Number one on the left is the existing. You have the porch and the steps, and dotted in above is the dormer that's above.
And you're maintaining that in the proposed?
Yes,
Okay, so you're not bringing anything further than what's existing there today?
correct.
And then the addition is, if you could just point out the additions, it's an expansion of the kitchen
Yes,
and a little bit of a bump out in the back and use of the garage as living space.
yes. The kitchen addition on the north, the front wall is in line with the existing front wall of the living room and dining room. And then we're removing 6 feet of the existing garage, the front of the garage, and adding 5 feet onto the back of it to meet the setback.
riparian,
requirement.
correct. And then the existing house, let's go up to the second floor. The existing house is 3 bedrooms and we're just making it 4 bedrooms, correct?
Correct. There are 3, 1 large, 2 average sized bedrooms. There's a loft over the existing garage. It's only accessed through the garage.
Okay.
So there's 3 bedrooms, and the bedrooms, part of the bedrooms are underneath the roof line, so they don't have a full 8 feet ceiling.
Okay, so we're maintaining the 3 bedrooms and converting that loft into a master bedroom, and we're adding some bathrooms and essentially
Correct.
making that floor a little more livable.
Bathrooms, and we're moving the laundry up to the second floor level. The laundry's currently in the basement, which is only a 6-foot ceiling.
Okay. Importantly, as it relates to the architecture, particularly the front of the house, what efforts did you make in your design to essentially maintain the character of the, existing Craftsman house and, pull the additions away from the street so as to mitigate the impact?
Number 1, drawing P2.0, number 1 is the existing. So you have the covered porch down below with the front dormer. And number 2 is what we're proposing. Covered porch is staying exactly the way it is, the front dormer is staying exactly the way it is. We're not raising the second floor ceiling and roof until 3 feet behind that dormer.
Okay.
We then did a double hip roof to minimize the height. The actual height of the new roof is only 3 foot higher than the existing main roof.
Okay, so it's not going to have the appearance of it's going to have varied roof lines, Particularly on the north end, the portion that is closest to Mr. Jackson's house, while the permitted height is 35 feet, that is only 20 feet 6 inches.
Right, we're keeping that below even the existing roof line. It's a story and a half. Originally, we were doing a full 2-story, but we've lowered that.
Okay, and a majority of the 2-story additions where the max height is at 24 feet. And the only portion that reaches up to the 27.5 feet are the peaks of that decorative dormer
Just the
in the
main,
front.
the main roof, yeah,
Okay, but a majority of the house is really only 24 feet tall.
correct.
No, there's a portion that's 27.6. Yes, which is those 2 dormers in the front, just to give it some architectural.
Just the main hip going front to back, behind the dormer.
But the majority of the house of the new is at 24, and the existing house is at 24.6.
Correct.
So you're essentially trying to work within the height of the existing house and
From grade, it's
create a
Yes.
little bit more.
6 feet,
of
27
cre-
feet.
I'm sorry?
From grade, it's 27 feet.
Right, but it's not measured from grade. It's measured from finished first floor.
Okay.
So I'm just doing it according to your ordinance because that's what I'd be required to.
Yeah, I get it.
But yes, it
It's
is.
27 feet high, though, the building, off ground.
Yes, off of the ground, absolutely. Because it's about 2.5 feet up. But as you know, your ordinance says it.
I
Yeah,
get it.
no. I'm saying it's.
I wasn't, yeah, I was just trying to think of height.
Yep, where the numbers are coming from. And then obviously in the rear, there's a little more substance to it, but again, that's facing the lake.
Right, we wanted to get as much windows in that, so it's facing the lake. We minimize windows on the sides.
Okay. Are there any questions for Tom?
No questions. Any questions from the public for this witness? If you can please share the microphone. We're gonna need you to speak into the microphone, sir.
Hey, Tom, have a seat here.
And if you can state your name and your address.
My name is Richard Flanagan. My address is 507 Beechwood Avenue, West Allenhurst, New Jersey.
Okay, and you can ask your question.
There was some information given here essentially saying that there is one additional bedroom in the house being proposed. Is that correct?
Yes.
So have you seen the 2 differences between the present house and the proposed house? Does that in fact have a bedroom on the first floor?
There's no bedroom on the first floor, no.
It says it on the map that's shown that we've all received.
That's the maps. I'm not sure what you mean, sir.
There's the living room, dining room, kitchen, the garage.
Okay, one of the
Do you have it with you,
Have it
sir?
with you?
Well, the fact was, does it matter that there's any difference between 1 bedroom downstairs and 3 bedrooms upstairs
There is.
and 4 bedrooms downstairs?
There's no bedrooms downstairs, sir.
According to this map, it does.
I can see what map you're referencing.
Unfortunately, my vision is not good.
It would be this one. If I can help you. These are the same thing as what you see here.
That's the exterior. Right. The exterior. I'm concerned about the interior.
No, I understand. Here it is. That's the second floor. And you have one, 2, 3, 4 bedrooms on the second floor.
Yes, I know, we're agreeing on that.
That's the first floor. There's nothing labeled bedroom here, sir.
If I could offer, I think what you might be seeing is the existing condition plan from
I'm sorry.
FPA, which notes the second floor bedroom. It's just written on the ground.
Oh, is that okay? Thank you, Mr. Chamorro. So
I don't know if that was,
it may be.
that's an exhibit you,
There it is.
That's okay. I want to make sure we understand.
Still gonna be looking, and if I find it, I'm gonna.
Okay, let me know. You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions from the public for this witness? Okay,
Okay, I'd like to call our professional planner, Andrew Janio.
okay. If you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Okay, and you've testified before.
Right, and Andy, you're a licensed professional planner, state of New Jersey, you've testified here numerous times.
Many times, yes.
Okay.
Certainly, it's JANIW.
Okay, Andy, recognizing that we've already gone through kind of the context of the home and what the relief is, let's turn to the proofs that are required, which would be to support the variance. Either we have a hardship or we have a better zoning alternative, and then whether or not there's a negative, substantial negative impact. And then let's talk about the exhibit that you created in order to demonstrate that.
Certainly. So let me start by saying, in preparation for this evening, we've been to the site, we've reviewed the plans, we've reviewed your ordinance, the master plan, the recent change to the R5 district. This is in your R5 high-density single-family residential zone, and what makes this lot particularly unique is it is a waterfront property with a peculiar shape. In preparation for this evening, I mentioned I looked at your master plan, your ordinances, and the reason we do that is because we have to reconcile our variances with your zone plan, with your master plan, with what your vision is for the community, as well as with public purposes, because no variances can be granted for the sole benefit of the applicant. There has to be a public benefit to that. And those public benefits are reiterated within the municipal land use law. And I'll go through that shortly. But let me start with the master plan. So in terms of reconciling what we're proposing with the master plan, your master plan was redone in 2023. And it's a pretty well-versed snapshot of the community. And it reads with respect to the land use ordinance, with the land use element, excuse me. It is inevitable that the future land development in the township will consist of an expansion of and or redevelopment of existing developed properties. The primary change to the land use should be in the form to respond to ongoing socioeconomic and environmental changes that will impact the types and intensities of land uses within existing land use categories. And it goes on to say, we recognize in our objectives that existing development patterns in the township are largely established and ensure that the future development does not conflict with those existing development patterns. Recommendations suggest allowing for an increase in building coverage in those areas of the township where smaller lot area requirements and possibly a variation in building coverage based on lot area. So there's a recognition that there's somewhat of an organic lot arrangement in many parts of the community. We can look at that exhibit that I prepared. I think it's A5.
A5, correct.
So this is a snapshot of the area, and we studied blocks 68, 73, 74, and 76 here, just in order to determine what the conformity ratio is here. Now, the minimum lot size area is 7,500 square feet, and you'll see there are many, many lots that are undersized here. We have lots that are 30 by 100. We have lots here that are 50 by 50. And we have a unique shape of lots along the waterfront. You see we're lot 2 in green there, and we are certainly a unique configuration of land use. And you'll see lot 7 again is a small waterfront lot. And you'll notice surrounding our lot, there are 2 white areas. To the north, there's a long, narrow area that's approximately 24 feet by 156 feet. That's a municipal-owned lot. And then to the south, there is a 5-foot strip of land between us and lot 4 that is also a municipally owned land. So from the streetscape, it appears that we have additional frontage. We do not. These are municipal lots on either side of us.
And we're not taking credit for that. That doesn't have any effect on the numbers that you're giving. It's just a matter of perception for the streetscape to the extent that aesthetics and light, air, and open space are a consideration.
Correct. I want to talk just generally about the character of the neighborhood and what the perceptions are. So this map studied the tax records for the community and determined what lot coverages are in the area. So the lots that are in yellow or goldenrod are lots that have coverage of between 25 and 33.1%, meaning more than is permitted within the district, but just under what we're asking for.
Okay, and when you say coverage, you're talking about the building coverage.
Building
And you
coverage,
did
correct.
this based on the tax records indicating the size of the lot, as well as the size of the structures on the lot.
Correct, and that would be principal structures and accessory structures as your ordinance
Anything with a
defines.
roof, essentially.
Correct.
And it would have been impossible to do that under the old ordinance because we would have to take into consideration environmental constraints,
That's right.
which we can't get from
Which
tax
are
records.
Buildable, right, the old ordinance
Right.
defined it under buildable lot area, that's
Okay,
correct.
so what did you find with regard to, in that very immediate neighborhood, the nonconformities?
So 61% of the lots are non-conforming with respect to lot coverage. The lots in red actually show an increase, a lot coverage that's greater than we are requesting. So we have, this is a sampling of 52 lots. I believe 32 are non-conforming. And you'll see we are generally right in that median of non-conformities with respect to what we're proposing in terms of lot coverage. So that is the character of the neighborhood. Again, it's a unique neighborhood. It's a desirable neighborhood, so lots have been subdivided, re-subdivided over the years. You do have waterfront lots here that are unique in shape and configuration, adding additional challenges to the development of the lot, and that is the case this evening.
And Andy, just looking at the lot immediately to our south, lot 4 in block 76, because it's obviously a large house when you look at the photos, but it's also a small lot. They're at 36.83%.
Coverage, correct. Building coverage.
And the house immediately across the street from that, which is lot 2, is also significantly over, not significantly over, but it's more than us at, it looks like about 33.37%.
33.37, correct. Slightly greater in building coverage than we are.
And in the block across from that, there are several which are in excess of what we are, and many, I would say close to a majority, which are near where we are.
Correct.
So again, and we're going to talk about the proofs, but essentially, should the board approve this, it would not be out of character with this neighborhood, which would be consistent with the master plan saying, recognizing that these organic neighborhoods have developed and the infill should maintain that character.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So,
moving forward to points of the municipal land use law, which are the public purposes within the MLUL. I would say that this application certainly promotes two of those. I is to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. The proposal before you, as you've seen through the architectural renderings and design, is for a continuation of a craftsman style home that's been historically on this property. I believe the home was built in 1925 pursuant to your tax records. The craftsman style had that recessed dormer. We're maintaining that recessed dormer. The porch front line will remain as it is. We are extending essentially to our north, which is towards the municipal lot. So from a streetscape, we're not proposing that extension towards any of the neighbors. It's towards the open space lot. And in fact, given the historic context here, I think the architects did a very nice job in preparing this home facade so that it maintains its historic caricature, historic height, historic appearance within the neighborhood, while still providing a more modern, livable home. The 4th bedroom addition, bringing the laundry to the top floor from a 6-foot high basement. These are things that'll promote the longevity of the neighborhood and longevity of the building. With respect to item M under the MLUL, which is to encourage the coordination of various public and private procedures and activities shaping land development with a view of lessening the cost of such development to the more efficient use of land. Again, we are looking to renovate and add on to an existing building. This isn't a tear down and new proposal. We are somewhat constrained by the existing footprint of the property and the frontage. We are working with that, and I think the architect did a yeoman's job of, again, architecturally maintaining a balance while making the home very functional. This is an efficient use of the land. It's a challenging lot to begin with.
well, Andy, let me just ask you a question. So you're talking about the special reasons. That really goes to the C2, if we
Yes.
were to argue under C2. So really, though, most of our variance relief, as we're looking at it, is based on the hardships that we have, based on the undersized lot, the unusual shape, the topography, and the environmental constraints.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I just want to put that in record because always public purposes for the
Right.
board to consider.
Understood.
Which brings us to the C variance relief. So, as this board knows, there's a C1, which is a hardship variance, and the C2, which is known as the flexible C or balance. The relief that we seek this evening generally qualifies under, actually specifically qualifies under the C1 criterion, as they're all driven by the existing conditions on the lot and the ability to reuse the footprint of the building. So we have lot area, lot depth that we cannot cure. There's no additional land to purchase to increase the size of the lot. With respect to the setbacks, the side yards, the rear yard, the front yard setbacks, again, we're building off an existing foundation. We are concentrating those improvements where they have the least impact upon the neighborhood. They're going to the north, to the open space, to the rear, out of any sight lines of the neighbors. The rear addition has been set at a point that is consistent in depth with the neighbor. There's nothing that will protrude to create any view from any angle being blocked. Again,
Not that they're
I was gonna
entitled
say
to
they're
the
not
view,
entitled. I was about to say that.
but
Yes,
we're preserving it anyway in the interest of
being good neighbors.
Right. And, you know, you talked about no detriment, and as we heard as a preview, the public is going to ask you about detriment. We don't have to show that there's no detriment. We just have to show that there's no substantial detriment that outweighs all the benefits and the fact that we have the hardship, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
And we can qualify all these variances under the C2 balance test as well, because we do believe it is a better zoning alternative than essentially starting over on this lot, working with this lot, creating what we've done in what I believe to be a sensitive manner in terms of controlling the height, in terms of controlling where the bulk of the building will be placed out of sight. These are all good alternatives. So with respect to the C2 variances, we'd have to show that it relates to a specific lot, and not only is it a specific lot, but it's a very unique lot, that the purposes of the municipal land use law would be advanced. I read 2 of those purposes into the record, and that the benefits of the deviation would outweigh any detriment. When we look at the benefits of this, obviously it's something that will maintain the character of the house. Again, we can go to 35 feet in height here. If we were going new, I'm sure we would look to maximize the height to the extent that we could. However,
But since we're not conforming and we recognize we have a smaller lot with some restrictions, we chose to be
keep the height compact.
27 feet from the ground.
That's right.
And in that particular area, only 24 feet from the ground.
Right. And that brings us to the negative criteria, which means that we have to prove that the variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good, and that it is legislatively substantial detriment. And finally, that the variance will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan. With respect to substantial detriment, I mean, typically what we look at from a planning perspective are the nuisance characteristics. Are we creating additional utilization of the property, additional traffic? Are we hindering stormwater management? Are we creating additional noise? The answer is this is a single-family home in a single-family neighborhood. The use is permitted. It is a single-family home. We're adding a bedroom to it. It's not going to create any substantial issues with respect to, there's not going to be an increase in density. It's a one-family home. It'll remain a one-family home. It's not going to create any substantial traffic. It's going to be a one-family home with all the traffic that's expected.
And even though we're adding a bedroom, we do comply with the parking.
That's correct.
And as it relates to the addition where we're adding a second story, you had indicated that with regard to light air and open space, we're not going any closer to any of the neighbors. We're staying in line with the existing
We're
house.
staying in line.
And we're going off the back towards the water, so there's no neighbor there. And you indicated that where we are going off to the back, how that could affect a neighbor would be their water view. But again, we're keeping our house in line with the front of the houses next to us and in the back in line, so as to not have any impact on view along the street as well as along the water.
That's correct. And the other thing I wanted to point out, and Jim pointed this out in his review letter, is we have essentially the characteristics of the lot where we have the open space lot between us and our neighbor to the south. That functionally adds an additional 5 feet of setback. So even though we need setback to that lot line, we have an additional 5 feet that we don't get to count, but visually is there and protects the neighbor to our south from that setback in terms of light air.
But again, in looking at the aerial and in looking at the house, it appears from the aerial that their house is probably looks a little bit closer to the
lot
property line than we are.
That's
So it you know, we point that out. So
So when we look at this on balance, what we're proposing is something that will make, again, an existing home more livable, bring it to modern standards. It satisfies anything that we need to do with respect to parking. We're not creating any issues with respect to runoff. You heard Smith testify that while we are increasing total impervious slightly, we're substantially under what the zone would permit in terms of total impervious coverage. Our building coverage is in line with the characteristics of the neighborhood. So in context, we are proceeding as your master plan anticipates with respect to the characteristics of the neighborhood. We're not doing anything that's offensive to the character of the neighborhood. We've been very sensitive to the character of the neighborhood in terms of how we've situated the additions and how we've positioned the additions on the lot.
And as it relates to the zoning ordinance, we're not contrary to the zoning ordinance because the zoning ordinance didn't anticipate an undersized lot so oddly shaped.
That's correct.
And that's the very basis for why the municipal land use law allows variances for instances like this.
That's correct.
Are there any questions for Mr. Genya?
What was the previous building lot coverage on the last design that you put together?
I couldn't tell you because it was based on buildable lot area, which deducted out all of the uplands. I'm sorry, which deducted out all the environmentally sensitive areas. So it was like 236%.
Okay, but I was curious to see how much the reduction on the footprint was done.
The footprint generally didn't get reduced very much. It got pulled in a little bit, but went out in the back.
Reconfigured.
It got reduced in height significantly.
So the building lot coverage didn't change
The
much.
the building coverage didn't change, but what did change is the way it's calculated
Yeah, no,
now.
I get that.
And importantly, now we're giving you the evidence with regard to the character of the neighborhood, which we couldn't do before because there was no way to establish that from the tax maps.
So, but just a question. So the green lot, which is
That's our lot.
that's your lot, is technically yellow on this map.
Yes, it should be yellow.
It should be yellow, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, well, essentially, the green map is kind of that midpoint. Yellow is up to our coverage. The red is greater than our coverage.
But your current coverage is yellow.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Do you the property that's 73.2 and 76.4 that you noted at 33.37 and 36.83%? How old are those houses? Have they been there for 75 years and the footprint hasn't changed in 75 years? Or did they come to this board and ask for a variance for building lot coverage to get them to 36 and 33%?
So 76 lot 4 has a year built of 1910.
Okay.
But we don't know if there's been additions to it.
We don't know. We don't know.
There's no way to know if there's additions, and when you look at the photo that I shared, I mean, I believe the owners are here.
I mean, it clearly looks like the facade has been redone.
Correct. But I think, Mr. DeGennaro, again, we're not saying that because they're here we should be allowed to. So even if they were all built in 1880, it's just establishing what the character is based on the lot size. Is not.
I get that, but
Okay.
and what I'm saying is it's already above the 25% as it is, and now you're asking to go from 28 to 33, and these other houses aren't asking to go from 33 to 38.
Well, I don't.
They're established at that point, and I don't know how long they've been there for.
Right.
If they've been there for 50 years or 60 years and aren't asking for a variance, that's a different argument to me than what you're trying to make.
Okay.
My opinion.
No. Understood as it relates to your opinion, and the only we're not making an argument
I get
relative
that.
to those. We're just saying this is the character of the neighborhood. So one of the things the municipal land use law makes us say is, what's the character? Are you affecting the character of the neighborhood, regardless if the character was established in 1902 or yesterday?
Right.
And also, the lot sizes are different, and
Of course.
we didn't analyze any of theirs, so I don't know what occurred and how they got there. We're just saying what's there today, we're consistent with.
Yeah. I can tell you, based on the tax records, at least 2 lots were approved at over 33.1. One lot 68, block 68, lot 11.
Yeah.
2005 was approved at 35.76%, and 73 9.02 was approved in 2011 at 39.68%.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have one. I'm trying to understand the hardship. I mean, this property wasn't bought that long ago, so they just don't like what they bought?
No. So, and I can answer that, and I'm sure that Mark can fill in, and so can Ron. So, what you're talking about, the hardship, you're talking about a self-created hardship, which is if I subdivide the property and create the undersized lot. The municipal land use law, the hardship goes with the land. You can buy a lot that is undersized, know it's undersized when you buy it, and still qualify for the variance. So the fact, and it's not that we didn't like it, at the time it was bought, we didn't have grown children with grandchildren who come and stay at the house. So the needs of the family changed somewhat over the years, but realistically, whether they changed or not, as long as the hardship wasn't self-created, it goes with the land. So the fact that it was a hardship, we knew it was a hardship, they knew what their rights were under coming to a board to ask for a variance and the like. I know that sometimes you're looking like, well, you bought it, so you got to live with it. Well, you bought it recognizing what New Jersey law allows you to present in order to justify the relief. So, yes, they bought it. Yes, they knew what it was, but they also, their family grew, as often happens, and generationally, the family's returning, and they're just looking to add a bedroom to accommodate that.
And you weren't here for it, but this house was one of the prime reasons, at least for me, for turning down the billboard on Monmouth Road, and that was the billboard. That this is what I referred to when you polled us on why we were voting no. This was the house I gave an example for.
I don't understand that. And
It was for the height issues, and you weren't here for it,
But
so
you're talking about the last application.
yeah.
For this house,
Mm.
not tonight.
No, not tonight, but that's.
wait, I don't know what the billboard, though, I'm confused.
We had an application for a billboard which required several variances, and both variances, one of which, well, the D6 is the height,
Right.
and both variances were the closeness to the street, and a few other things, and the development of the property.
Right, but in this particular case, we pulled the development back from the street, we reduced the height significantly, and it is not an overdevelopment because we're substantially under the impervious coverage.
Right.
The impervious coverage is designed as to what the development.
That's a measure of intensity of
Right.
all the improvements on the lot, not just the building. And we are substantially under what we are permitted within the district. We're also substantially under the height that we're permitted. And I think Jim, in his analysis, put it fairly succinctly that had this been a conforming lot, we would meet the building coverage. But having said that, even though it's an undersized lot, he takes that as a measure of saying the home that's proposed is consistent with what would be anticipated in the neighborhood because the conforming lots would have a home of similar scale. So what we're proposing is not an overdevelopment, in fact, consistent with the pattern of the neighborhood.
Right, and one of the things Jim asked for was exactly that is, what the pattern of the neighborhood is by way of coverages, and that's why Andy provided all of that information. So I just point out that your planner, who takes no exception to this, the only exception he took was calling the office on the second floor should be changed to a den or study, which is fine.
I guess I had an architectural question, and I apologize for asking this now, but if you took the garage, like you're doing now, and redo the house, you could fit another master bedroom without adding any square footage to the property.
Right, but
And still be able to modernize the house and add the bedroom and change the space the way you're looking.
so the application isn't just for the one bedroom to add.
No, I know what you're doing. You're putting 3 additions on in 3 different spots.
But just to address what you said, we're expanding the kitchen significantly. It's a little kitchen, a little dining room. So, the additions are really to increase the living space for the family. As I'd indicated, it's 2 generations living in this house. Expanding the kitchen. And there are always ways to minimize the variance relief. You could not do anything and then you wouldn't need any variance relief. But that isn't really the test as to how do you make it less. The test is, you know, do we meet the statutory criteria? Do we have a hardship? And you know, what are we doing by way of impact? But the space on the first floor is really just expanded living space to allow for bigger kitchen, dining room, and a real family room.
Okay.
Is there any additional impervious coverage other than the footprint of the home itself?
So there is the driveway, the patio.
Additional though, from the existing condition?
The driveway is being increased, I believe, as we're taking the 6 feet off the front of the garage and extending the driveway.
The existing impervious is 41.84. The proposed impervious is 45.11.
Okay.
How much of that is broken down between house and, I'm not sure exactly.
So we permit up to 65%.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Right, and that increased driveway is obviously to meet the RISA standard for parking.
Got it, okay.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? Yes, if you can, the microphone.
Well, yeah.
So statements have been made by both the attorney and the planner. My name is Earl Jackson. I live at 503 Laurel Ave, across the street from the property. Yeah, no, that's good. Statements have been made by both planner and attorney on behalf of the planning part of this. I understand my questions are to be directed only at the planner and not the attorney.
She will chime in, believe me. Just
Because I hear things that are inconsistent with a number of issues. As a planner, the public good is part of how this could be argued for as something that could be considered.
Yes, and the public good are measured by the purposes of the municipal land use law, the two that I read into the record.
In your opinion, the space between this property and the one to the south has a municipal passage.
I'm not sure if it's used as a passage. It's a 5-foot municipal strip of land.
It's a right of way for waterfront access.
right now you're testifying, which you will have a chance to do later.
Right. So my question is, with a 5-foot allotment between properties, an additional bulk on that allotment, would you testify that that is for public good?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Further increasing or decreasing the space that allows the public to pass through, or the presence of bulk that makes it inviting?
Well, we're not. We're not increasing any of the side yard setbacks. As a matter of fact, the building's been aligned to be consistent with the existing side yard setbacks. So we're not encroaching into that 5 foot. My testimony was that 5 foot acts as an additional visual space. And we had also pointed out that the building on lot 4 is actually closer to that 5 foot space than we are. We're not encroaching any more than we have in the past. We've maintained that
You mean not in the
specifically.
past, than existing?
In existing conditions, right. That we've maintained that setback. So there is no additional encroachment, there's no impediment. We're not putting anything in that 5 space that would impede any passage.
So in your setback, which is 14.2 feet required for side yard,
Combined.
there's not combined, on each side.
Yes.
In that setback, are you proposing new bulk on the second floor?
We are consistent with what we have there.
So there's no new bulk above the garage.
Well, there is an addition above the garage.
So my question is that imposing second floor addition increasing or decreasing public good for the passage between the street and the waterfront?
I think it's consistent with the public good in terms of what's there today is being maintained. First of all,
But it wasn't my
it doesn't
question.
have an impact on the public whatsoever. The public has the ability to rely on that 5 foot right of way. That is not being impeded in any way by this application.
I won't testify, but I would disagree.
Are you a planner by chance?
Do you have
I am.
other questions?
No, you can.
Yeah, I have a list of questions, but I don't want to burn you guys out with them. I think blocking the quarter is rough.
We're not blocking.
Only to my extent, blocking views was also an issue. When
Ask him your questions and then present your own testimony.
fair. When the building expands or increases its width by nearly 50%, does that add to the public good or detract from it?
Okay, so let me start with the statement they said we're blocking views. First of all, as a planner, you're probably aware of the case law that's extensive. You're not entitled to a view. If you wanted the view, you should have bought waterfront. I mean, that's basically how the case law's been over the years. So in terms of maintaining views, we think we've done a wonderful job in doing that. When you look at our alignment of the building and the addition to the rear, we are not encroaching whatsoever on the lot to the south. They maintain the view corridor and the view angle that they've always had. Our addition goes up to the line that's consistent with the setback of their property to the waterfront.
Andy, how about on the north though? We don't need a variance for that setback, right?
No, we're consistent, we're
Compliant.
compliant on the north side.
So that, the ordinance doesn't contemplate a view in that area.
That's correct. And if you look at the alignment of the house across the street, that would be concerned about the view, whether they're entitled
You
to it or
mean
not.
Mr. Jackson's house?
Yes. There is no impediment to that view.
Does the proposed addition to the north side encroach upon both front and rear yard setbacks?
It's consistent with the setback that's there today, yes. We are asking for variance relief for the front and rear yard. And again, the rear being to the water.
Does the space in the front and rear yard to the north close the view corridor between the sidewalk where people walk their dogs and the waterfront?
Well, there is, first of all, the view corridor there is consistent with what's anticipated in terms of the requirements for side yard. We are permitted to be where we are with respect to the side yard setbacks. With respect to the front and to the rear is to the river, or to the lake. It's consistent with our neighborhood, and to the front, we are consistent with the neighborhood corridor. If you take a look, looking down South Edgemere, we are absolutely consistent with the properties to the south of us in terms of how they're set back from the street. It is the character of the neighborhood, so I don't believe we're impeding on the view corridor.
Andy, would we need variance relief to plant trees in that location?
No.
And we could plant 10 oak
You could put a
trees in
berm,
that
you could put
location?
trees, yeah.
Well, we can't put a berm, that would require variance. But we could plant oak trees or any trees as long as they're not in a hedge, and that view is not protected by the ordinance,
That's
is
correct.
what I'm saying.
That's correct.
Can you tell me the height of the canopy for an oak tree?
Well, what makes it an oak tree?
Its species.
You know what I'm saying, but we could.
Because I had said oak trees, we could do an
Okay.
oak tree,
We could do arborvitae.
and we could do hollies underneath it that could
Yeah.
fill in
We could put
where the
arborvitae
canopy
across
is.
the front, which is a nice visual barrier.
Is there an ordinance that limits the height of shrubs that you put on the front yard of a property?
Only if in the form of a hedge, if it's a fence, they can be scattered anywhere you'd like on your property without any,
The question was to the planner.
well,
They can be
you
scattered,
indicated
yeah.
you're asking me questions too,
I asked
thought
if it was
jumping
okay
in.
to put
Sorry.
clarity.
Only to the extent that it's a hedge, that we could plant across, and create, again, the trees, aligned across that portion of the property in any way we'd like.
I would appreciate that.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the public? If you can, we need you to get the microphone, please.
And then I just have a follow-up question, Madam Chair.
Once again, Richard Flanagan, I'm still at 507 Beechwood Avenue.
Yeah, you haven't moved yet.
My question is, when you consider the neighborhood, are you just considering the southeast portion of West Allenhurst? Or are you considering the southwest and the northwest and the northeast?
So I'm looking at the context, again, I don't know if you saw the exhibit, when we looked at the character,
We looked at those.
so we looked at this area here in terms of lot coverage, we could expand the area. But we look essentially at what the characteristics are along Beal Lake and as well as the first block in. Those essentially are the lots that have organically spurred because of their location to the water. You've seen lots divided, subdivided over the course of years. So this is where we concentrate in terms of characteristics of the neighborhood.
You can have that copy, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. Yeah, sure.
Uh,
You're being so nice.
the hardship.
Just maintain that.
Any house which is on water is benefited by that hardship
Well, no.
standard?
They have to understand, we're undersized, we're oddly shaped, and there was testimony that the buildable envelope, because of the peculiar shape of the lot, is essentially a small triangle that I believe one of the board members said you could barely put a toll booth on. So when you put all the setbacks on that are required by the zoning ordinance, there really isn't a buildable area that could maintain a home, even though the lot is 5,000 plus square feet.
So these maybe 8
Well,
properties right on
as you
the
see,
water.
the 2 lots there that are in white meet the coverage requirements. I can't tell you whether they, I don't believe the one lot to the south.
Did they have to? Were they considered hardship when?
Well, that's again, depending on the setback to the rear and what the setbacks are to the waterfront and the riparian rights and everything else.
But Andy, when it's a hardship, it's only, he had testified at the beginning, it's only to a specific piece of property.
Right. The standard is it relates to a specific piece of property.
So the short answer is not every undersized lot necessarily has a hardship. The hardship is, the legal standard is whether or not there's a hardship to develop it according to the ordinance standards as compared to anybody else. So
But
in this,
isn't it contrary to common sense to say that a property that's located on the water, that's more valuable because it is located on the water, gets the benefit greater on the hardships, or on the standards on it?
the same lot inland would have the same hardship. We just have an additional layer because of the way that the riparian buffer cuts in, so we can't go closer to the river. But this lot, anywhere in this neighborhood would benefit from the same hardships, based on its odd shape and what the setbacks are.
But all the lots on the water do benefit from the hardship.
No, I can't say that they do. I know it's only with regard to this one.
You haven't investigated that.
That's not part of what the proofs are under the New Jersey law for variance relief.
Could I jump in and ask a question? Is it fair to say that most of these houses in this neighborhood, these lots were drawn before the current ordinances were put in place?
A majority of the homes here date back to 1905, 1910, so absolutely.
And so all the rules that the township has in place on setbacks, it is kind of hard for most of these lots to, anybody who wanted to change with even just change just go straight up would have to come before this board. So a lot of these would suffer a hardship if somebody tried to do an improvement on
Yeah, but I didn't want to confirm that without having looked at all of them
Yeah, each lot would have to be studied, but again, going to your master plan, it recognizes that that's a situation in certain neighborhoods within the community. And it says, when you have that situation, you try to maintain the characteristics of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I'm just trying to be clear because that's how I heard the question coming across, and I don't think it's controversial to look at this and see how the width of these properties and make the leap that most of these would have a hardship, right?
Yeah. And just one follow-up question, Andy. As it relates to the setbacks, the purposes of them are light air and open space.
Correct.
And separation of buildings.
Yes.
So in an instance where we are building into what the neighborhood has enjoyed as an open vista view into the water, the ordinance isn't protecting that, in that there is no lot on the other side from which to keep away from, to keep that open space.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And when you'd indicated that you could put a line, we can't put a line of trees wherever we want.
We could scatter some
But
trees.
we could scatter trees, that view is not protected.
That's right.
We could put a 4-foot solid fence, we could plant trees behind it. So again, the setback requirements and the front and the back certainly have nothing to do with a view on the side.
That's correct.
Any other questions from the public? You can come to the microphone.
Why don't you put the mic up there, Andy?
If you can state your name and your address and
Yes, my name is Gene Tate. I'm at 604 Laurel Avenue. I have a question on parking. How big is the driveway there that is planned? And is that going to hold enough traffic that 4 bedrooms will produce? Since this is a non-conforming lot, the neighborhood is a non-conforming neighborhood per se.
Let him answer the question.
So no, I know, I'm just letting him know
I'm
while
just
he's
playing.
looking. We don't need a variance for parking. The ordinance and the RSIS requires us to have 2 parking spaces, and I believe that's what we
That's
have.
what we have.
So
That's why they're expanding the driveway to get ten.
we do conform to that.
Okay, so that, but you're saying that this addition is not gonna be a detriment to the neighborhood, is gonna bring more traffic into the neighborhood, because you won't have areas to park the car.
Now you're
No,
testifying.
we will have sufficient area to park the cars. We meet the standard.
For 4 bedrooms?
Yes. That's how the residential site improvement standard measures how many parking spaces are required.
Because in that neighborhood, every
No,
house,
No, you can't testify now, you're not under oath. He answered your question.
Question.
If you'd like to come, we have another part of this application where we open it to the public, you can be sworn, you can tell the board anything you want.
But we comply with what we are required to provide.
And we are at, we're 1 hour and 8 minutes, so I'm going to ask if we can continue this because I still want to hear from our experts, and then we obviously want to allow the public to give testimony. So can we carry this to December 19th without notice?
Let me just take a quick look, Madam Chair. I just may not be available. I mean, may I suggest that we do that for purposes of notice, but recognize that we may have to further adjourn it based on schedules?
I don't have an
So you're
issue.
not available anyway?
Mr. Steinberg, any issues with that? Mr. Steinberg, any issues?
Pardon me.
For the record, carrying to December 19th, but without notice, but it may need to carry further?
Yeah, well, and we'll announce it at that next one. My guess is since Andy's not available on the 19th, but since you don't have your dates yet for 2025.
We do,
Oh, what's the January date?
16. Thursday.
Who's telling my sister I'm not going out with her for her birthday? You, Gina? Kara's birthday is the 16th.
You were gonna be here anyway for another case.
You won't be here. Okay.
So can we carry to December
Let's keep
19th
it to the
without
19th for
notice,
now,
and
without
then we
further
will?
notice, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Okay, our next case, oh,
This hearing will be carried till December 19th, at the regular Thursday night, in this room at 7 p.m. But in the event that there's a conflict, then they ask to carry it further. So what I would suggest is Wednesday or Thursday morning, contact Claire and see what's due.
Thank you very much. And I guess happy Thanksgiving.
yes, happy Thanksgiving.
Is it Thanksgiving?
Okay, our next case, First French-Speaking Baptist Church, Block 38, Lots 71 and 72, 2795-2797 Asbury Avenue, Ocean, 07712 R2. Attorney is Amanda Curley. Applicant is seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval to construct an approximately 14,096 square foot house of worship. The use is a conditional use in the zone. The applicant is requesting a conditional use approval where several bulk variances are also required.
Getting out of your way. Doing the best I can here to get out of here, sorry. I really am. I gotta hurry.
Thank you so much, though.
Well, I was gonna ask that, like, I was gonna ask him, like, what's the building lot coverage here? Yeah. Probably like 15%. Okay, so are we averaging this out?
Some of these lots are non-conforming, 5,000 square feet.
Like, look at this one. Look at this.
When you don't color the ones that don't have the case, it hurts your case.
I know, that's why I was like, well, it's nice you showed in green, but it's really.
Okay.
I'm gonna let my court reporter set up.
And the rest of these are green.
That's okay
Yes.
with you?
The rest of these are
Thank
great.
you.
I'd like to have that lot.
Kayak past that. Amazing.
Yeah, you're fine.
But they have all
Yeah.
half the stuff all over the page.
Ms. Curley?
Am I good? Okay. All set, thank you. Good evening, Amanda Curley from Dave Pitney on behalf of the applicant, the First French-Speaking Baptist Church. If you recall, we were here in January, so this is a continuation of that public hearing. We are seeking to have preliminary and final major site plan to construct a house of worship on property located at 2795 to 2797 Asbury Avenue, also identified as lots 71 and 72 in block 38 on the tax maps. So we were here on the 18th of January, which was a very long time ago, and since then we made some big revisions in basically in response to the board commentary and public commentary. We still require a D3 conditional use variance, but now the only condition that we do not meet is for minimum lot depth. So that is it. That is the only item that we do not meet. Otherwise, we meet all the conditional use standards, and we do not meet that minimum lot depth due to the irregular size and shape of the parcel, as well as the existence of a paper street to the rear. And with that paper street there, just simply, we will always require that variance for the D3. The property is located in the R2 zone, and then we need a couple other variances. Some we eliminated, and some we still require. So just as the highlight reel of our revisions for the boards to catch you up on it. So the first thing we did is we moved the driveway further along east on Asbury, as requested. I know we spoke a lot about the location of the driveway to service this house of worship. Then we did a survey of all existing members of the current church, and we figured out how much parking we needed. And then we reduced our parking to meet that demand and then increase the residential buffers, because that was a big conversation piece at the last meeting. That also brought our impervious coverage into compliance, so we no longer require a variance for impervious coverage, and we're under the maximum required. We also really installed a robust landscape plan to put lots of trees and other kind of plantings to, again, further kind of surround the use from all the residential uses located on either side. And we also eliminated the basin in the front yard. That was also a concern. So we added in porous pavement and kind of redesigned our stormwater management system, which our engineer will address tonight. And then we relocated the garage and the dumpster, so they're not in the rear anymore, so we no longer have a setback issue there. There are some other revisions, and Paul's going to go through them. And then just so we can go through the C variances that we still require. We require a variance for grade change. We exceed 2 feet at 3 feet. We need a variance for the curb cut in where it's located for the driveway. Again, we can make the driveway comply, but I believe the board wanted us to move it more east and kind of away. And your variance says it has to be located at the 1/3 portion, and we've moved it based on concerns the board have with crashes and location. We need a variance now for parking because, again, we reduced the parking in order to provide more buffering. So we propose an equivalent of 218 spaces where 251 are required. We also reduced the amount of EV stations because that also seemed to be a concern. Lastly, I believe we need a variance because our landscaping plan was not prepared by a landscape architect. And I believe those are all the variances that we require. So it's the D3 and then those Cs. And with me tonight, I have our engineer, Paul Anderson. I believe he was previously qualified, so I don't know if the board wants to re-up him.
Sworn.
If you can raise your right hand, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Okay, any change in your credentials?
No, all my licenses are still current.
Okay.
So for the purposes of the record, I believe we entered in Exhibit A1 last time.
Oh, and can we mark, I'm sorry, can you mark the packet?
Yeah.
We marked the board packet B1 tonight's date.
Yes.
Stuff before we got.
And then I also have the original green slips if you'd like them. Claire? Okay.
You only did it last time was A1?
I believe so. I looked at the transcript.
Okay.
I had,
That was
Claire?
site plan, I would assume, right?
I have A1 was the area of the existing conditions. A2 I had exhibit 2 site plan exhibit.
Okay.
Right.
And A3 was the combo
Great.
building utilities and landscaping.
That sounds correct.
Great. So we'll start with A4 tonight.
Okay.
And with that, Paul,
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Amanda, for that. I have very little testimony now. So let me put up the next exhibit, which is
Second, sir, I'm sorry. I just have a quick question. Should we be reading Mr. Higgins' report before this or no?
Well, we were planning with us tonight, and it's part of our packet, and it's been available to us.
Okay.
But we have a live planner.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I don't think we're gonna reach through planning this evening. I hope to get through Mr. Anderson and if we can, Mr. Dooley. So we're gonna mark this as A4.
Okay, so A4 is the colorized version of the new site plan. At our last hearing, there was a lengthy discussion about parking and buffering. There was concern about the buffering of the
I'm sorry, A4 is what, revised plans?
Revised plans rendered.
it's a rendered site plan, colorized site plan. It doesn't have a revision. It still has the original date, 1/6/24.
But it's not, it's been revised.
It's been revised, yes. It doesn't have a revision date on it. I did put a revision date on it.
One would date it August. I think our last. Let me look at the plan.
We can put today's date on it.
Let's
if you
put
want.
today's date.
Document control 101.
We'll do November 12th.
Well, you can't change the date on the submitted plan, that's for the, whoever signed it.
This is new.
Yes, that's me that signed it.
This wasn't submitted. Previously submitted.
But you're gonna date it tonight? When was it done?
It was done yesterday
We'll date it.
when we colorized it yesterday,
But
and we didn't.
before you
And,
colorized it, is that the plans you submitted to us?
Yeah.
For tonight's hearing, and that was.
well,
not-
it is
You never redated it?
the plan you have. It's not 100% of the plan. There's certain things shut off. There are certain other things turned on that are not on your site plan.
It was prepared for this hearing. So
It's
typically
prepared
I
as an
would-
exhibit of the site plan to give the general orientation.
The site plan that you gave that we're gonna be voting on, if we're voting on it tonight, what is that date?
That is last dated
August.
August 14th,
Okay,
24.
so this is just a,
Is it?
This is a new exhibit. It's a rendered drawing. So it's a totally new drawing to the extent that it was prepared for this hearing and not previously submitted.
based on the A4 submission, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So there was extensive testimony about, or a discussion about the buffer over to the residences on Sharon Drive. We had met the setback requirement of 25 feet, and we had a row of parking that came off of this parking lot over here where I'm tracing in red on the east side of the property. Based on the traffic study that we had done, which identified what we believe is the ratio for this applicant, which our traffic engineer will testify to later, he came up with a higher ratio. Your current ratio is 2 to 1. One car for every 2 people, basically. And we found a higher ratio, 2.56, I believe is his number. So we didn't need as many parking spaces. So we have taken out an entire row of parking here, reduced the impervious coverage, increased the buffer to the lots on Sharon Drive to 45 feet from their property line to the to the curb line from 25. We now have 206 parking spaces when we eliminate that row, 206 physical spaces. We also have 12 EV parking spaces. Technically, that gives you a credit. One of the discussion points that we had at the board meeting is we had all of the EV spaces near the building, all the prime parking spots, and the board seemed to indicate that they should be located more remotely so that those prime parking spots could be used regularly. Now, we have moved those to the outer parking area with exception of the 2 that are right here, because we wanted to provide EV spaces for ADA parking also. There's an obligation to provide it for both ADA spaces as well as regular parking spaces. So that gives us 251 spaces were required, 218 are proposed. With this additional green space, we were able to increase our tree planting, which was another concept that was discussed to increase the number of trees. We now have 350 trees proposed, 78 of which are deciduous, 272 are evergreen. The same number of trees are proposed to be removed, 168 qualifying trees, as noted by your ordinance. And as Mr. Higgins, your planner had indicated that he would be looking at all the trees in the field, and if there's some that could be saved in these areas, he would save them. So that number is likely to come down, but he wanted to leave that, get the relief with the number that we have, and take care of that in the field. And if the number changes and the tree fund donation changes, that would be resolved during construction. All right, so
Paul, for the record, we meet the tree replacement ordinance, and we no longer require relief.
we do require relief, but less significant relief. I believe it's 38 trees. All right, one of the other things that we did is we had the back here, we had in this area here, we had a storage garage and a dumpster, and we moved that here. That was to get that out of the front yard of this paper street. So now that is in a conforming location, and that doesn't create an additional element for the D3 nonconformity. Amanda had mentioned that the driveway was moved closer, farther to the east. We had a longer discussion about this. There was an accident history and a discussion with the board engineer and board planner prior to our initial submittal. It was recommended that we provide additional space from the high point down here on Sharon Drive all the way down here because there was a fatal accident there, and we felt that additional site distance would make it a safer condition for the driveway if it was farther away from that high point so people could see people pulling out. So we have moved it there. At the first meeting, there was objection because we had it in this location that it was overdone, so we moved it, and now we are, I believe, 75 feet from the sideline to the center line of this driveway, and the middle third starts at 92 feet. So we're slightly off of the middle third still, but not quite there. But that lines up well with the rest of the on-site circulation. One of the other items I want to, I presume this will be 5?
A5.
Okay. This is a colorized version with the same date issue as the last one. This shows the additional planting where we've added an additional row of evergreen trees along this entire buffer area and added some deciduous trees here to have a more of a vertical element along in this buffer area. So we've really substantially beefed up the buffer area. And the planting on the interior has remained largely the same. What was also mentioned is the stormwater management basin that was in the front has been removed, so now we have tree planting in there, but it is limited by the site triangle for the driveway, so we had to not have a complete planting of that area, but we have to maintain the site triangle as clear, which is part of your ordinance. This is a utility plan. This is directly from the set. This is last revised 8/14/24. So since the last application, we had soil testing done on site to justify the existing soil conditions. Previously, we had used soils report that was done for a subdivision that was an application prior to this, and it had a lot of soil data, but there was concern from the public that there was standing water on top of the soil all the time, and that they didn't think we were going to get the permeability that I was noting we expected in our drainage design. So we did that testing. We found that there was a layer at the top of a silty material that indeed was not permeable, so the neighbors were correct. But immediately below that material was a beautiful sandy material that is very permeable. So our drainage design has been modified to have a porous pavement system on the east side, one on the west side, and one in the front here that controls the stormwater from the site in accordance with the state standards. It's using green technology with porous pavement systems. It meets the recharge requirement, it meets the discharge rate requirement, and it meets the water quality requirement. So it meets all these things, discharges to Asbury Avenue as it has in the past. The benefit that came out of this is we had that large deep basin there, and there was a concern expressed by the at least one or more members of the public about that being a hazard to the children in the neighborhood, that they could get in and maybe they would drown or something would happen to them. So that basin's no longer there. Visually, it will also look significantly better. It'll be a mild slope up from the street to there, which will all be grass, but with the trees that I showed on the last exhibit that shows there's planting in the back to provide some buffer canopy. So this additional testing and redesign of the storm drainage has been a nice modification in terms of the overall appearance of the site as well as the function, and we demonstrated that the function of the basins will work in accordance with the standard with new testing. Then the last element I'd like to discuss is I'm just in between. I don't want to talk if I'm talking. I'm in transit. This is an exhibit that
It's gonna be D7?
yes. It's also dated 8/14/24. It has not been submitted. This is the result of a meeting that we had with Monmouth County. Monmouth County was concerned about the entrance to the site, and they suggested that we look at either a left turn lane or a right turn in and a right turn out, both of which would be acceptable. The left turn lane would require extensive improvements up and down the street. The left turn in and right turn in and right turn out would be safer, would be within the property limits with the same road improvements that we proposed before, same location that I just discussed just a few moments ago. It's just a little bit wider at the mouth, and this would function. This has been designed in accordance with Monmouth County standards. They have not reviewed it yet, but that's an ongoing conversation we're having with them with regard to the access to the site.
Asbury Avenue, County Road?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Mark.
Asbury Avenue, County Road.
Thank you.
And as such, Monmouth County Planning Board has jurisdiction, right?
Correct.
That's correct. Okay. So,
That's correct. So that is that change, and that would be if the county is accepting of this change, it will be incorporated into the full set of plans that we have.
so if you're coming east, how do you get in?
Well, this is an organization that has people that come to the site every day. It's not a shopping center that people are coming for the first time. So when they come on Sunday and they know how to get there, they're going to come so that they can turn right in, and then they're going to go out right, and they're going to find their way home from there. After the first time, they'll be repeat customers, as you might think.
It just makes it difficult for people.
Well, they do have to find a different path. It's not the most convenient path, but it's probably a safer alternative, which is why the county would like to have it.
And if the county wants it, the county gets it.
That's correct.
And we will have a traffic engineer at the next
I
hearing.
mean, The
to
county's
speak to it.
insisting on it.
Yeah.
We're not gonna-
Yeah.
we're not gonna grant it that way.
I will say that the county has the jurisdiction over, obviously, a left turn lane or the right in, right out, but they are not necessarily considering how somebody's going, if somebody's gonna bypass the site coming east, and where are they gonna turn around. So, I think this is probably more of a question for the traffic engineer, but,
Yeah.
that's something that we'll have to discuss.
Yeah, I think the traffic engineer will go into more detail than I did with regard, I do believe comes down to people knowing how to get to where they want to go, but I think he'll have more detail on it than that statement.
Okay.
I've looked at the report prepared by the board's engineer, and the things like the mounting analysis and maintenance plan are fairly standard requirements, and we will be happy to do those. And so I really have no objections to his comment letter.
What will you title?
The CME Associates Review Letter dated September 25th, 2024.
What can we?
It is item 6A and B.
Oh, this?
Yeah.
Oh,
this one.
A7.
I know it's.
Oh.
What is this item? A7, what are we calling it?
County driveway
County?
exhibit.
So it's county, okay, so it's Monmouth County Planning Board driveway exhibit. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. And that's all I have for this evening.
Any questions?
I have two questions.
Sir.
On the previous exhibit, you noted the driveway moving, I guess it was 75 feet from, is it the western property line?
Mm-hmm.
And the requirement would be 92?
Yeah, I think that's what the numbers are. That's correct.
Yeah, that's the number.
And so is that the west side of the driveway? Is that what the measurement is?
That was to the center line of the
Center
driveway.
line of the driveway,
Yeah,
okay.
that's why when I said this is approximately the same place, but it's a little bit wider at the mouth, at the street frontage. That center line position is the same, but the left side is obviously
Got it.
farther,
Okay.
closer to the property line.
And then the second question on the porous pavement, you noted that the geotech or whatever borings or whatever you did, that there was this layer of silt of
Mhm.
permanent.
Yes.
Is the intention to remove that layer and then
Yes.
do the pavement? So, okay.
Yes, in fact, we have, there is a certain element of it that has what's called soil replacement, which could be done with soils on site. And that soil, as long as the soil actually tested to meet the permeability requirement. So they would strip off the silty layer, stockpile it somewhere away, and then bring in the appropriate material from either from on site or import it, whatever they had to do. Most likely on site though.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Other board members
I have a
or
question.
experts with questions?
Your buffer, you say you're at 45 feet right now from the
Yes,
neighbors?
that's correct.
What was it before you changed it to 45?
25.
25 to 45.
Yes.
The other question I have is, you talked about the EV spaces.
Yes.
I'm not sure if this is a question for you or not, but have you contacted the electric company to make sure they can supply the proper electric that they need to power these EV stations? And will it interfere with the residents that live locally?
I have not contacted the utility company. It's probably not something that is in my court to do in terms of doing that. These EV stations normally do not, when you have 12 of them, is not going to take that much power where it impacts the neighborhood.
Well, I think we should look into that. I think that's something that I would like to request to make sure that we do have enough power to power them. Because I know of other areas that just two EV stations, the power company said we can't help you supply with
And I know of two other areas where, not in Ocean Township, but the power company has denied supplying power to EV stations because they said that they couldn't handle it. So, and that was with just two. So you're putting 12 in. So I think it's important to contact them and make sure that we can do it.
All right, we'll put that on our list.
Okay.
Just a follow-up question to that. So last time we were here, we had them all in the same area, and the board didn't like that. Would you prefer them to all be by the building? Because we can do that.
I'm fine with wherever you put them. I just want to make sure that we can accommodate and it does not interfere with supplying power to our neighborhoods. That's what's important.
You mentioned something that is kind of near and dear to my heart. One of the things I always suggest to boards, and Mr. Higgins will probably be back next time, fire departments, when they're reviewing them, get very concerned about how they place them. So what I would just say is, while you may want certain areas, I don't think if this application is approved, be stuck to this. I would say that it would be conditioned upon approval of the fire department. Because if they approve and you have specific spaces, I think this should be almost, illustrated. But we'll try to, but it really should be ultimately approved by the fire department. Because I've had other municipalities I represent, they're very concerned about certain locations that they have.
Well, yes, Ron, I understand what you're saying. I have had applications where there's under-building parking, and the fire chiefs are very concerned because EV cars that start on fire do not go out. And so with the modification that we've made to the plants, we are somewhat protected from that. The building, they are moved to places that are remote from the building.
And that's a good thing, but ultimately you never know. I had a case in a municipality, I just came here, where the fire department actually, they would still overpark, so it was good, but they wanted a little extra width in this certain area that it was just too tight. So they did lose 2 spots, but it didn't affect the approvals because we still had more than enough parking, so we considered it a field change.
Sir, have you sent these plans out to the fire department, or they reviewed the prior ones?
Yes.
These revised ones in August?
August 1st.
August 1st? So but these were revised August 14th.
Yeah.
So could you just send the
Revised.
sheet with the EV
Yes.
stuff to the fire department as you
Change
comment
from
on
July to
location?
August.
So we could have something with the location?
From July to August?
I don't know. I don't recall. But obviously, whatever the fire chief recommends,
Right,
we're gonna
so
do.
we'll send out that.
So whatever he says or she says, then fine.
Okay, any other questions?
And you'll find out for us, the JCP knows.
Yes.
I do have another question. Total amount of trees to be removed, you said were 168, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Qualifying trees.
And there
Certain
were
diameter requirement.
38 trees for relief. Can you explain what that means?
So, go back to my calculation in the plans.
And I just want to clarify for the record, the tree is actually a design waiver, not a variance, correct? Paul?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
That's correct. Also, all these trees will be marked, and Jim will field check them, and if they can stay, they won't be removed. This will probably be the worst case scenario, I assume, that we're setting up. And he has to pay for 38 trees, basically.
It's actually 36. I had it off by 2. So there are certain credits you get. So the tree of the 350 trees I noted, many of them are classified as buffer trees, and you don't get credit for those buffer trees. When you look at the remainder and you subtract the 168 minus the 132 that we provide, we're 36 trees short. So that 36 is the current number that we would have to pay for to the tree fund, and
or plant.
well, that 36 that we haven't found a place for.
Do you find any place?
If Jim finds a place for 36 more, then we'll plant them. And if he finds ones that we don't want to take out that are qualifying trees, then that'll change the number too. But what I was mentioning before is that's all be done during construction, where you have these little tweaks to what is the donation to the tree fund, if anything.
Thank you. I just have one more question back to the buffer for the residents. You went from 25 feet to 45 feet, and have you considered making that buffer any bigger than that to accommodate the residents? Because 45 feet is really not much for such a large complex being built on such a, this is a massive project. It's not small. Okay, you have a lot of parking spaces, 206 of them. And you're going to have a lot of traffic because from what I'm seeing here, this is going to be 7 days a week. This is not just on Sundays for Sunday Mass or Sunday worship. This is for every day. So I believe a buffer, and my request is that we need a bigger buffer because 45 feet is not enough for the residents that have been living there. Taking into consideration that, it is a house of worship and we understand that, but we also have quality of life for the residents that have been living there for such a long time, their whole lives basically. So I think we need a bigger buffer than 45 feet.
I understand your point. We 25 is the requirement, and we almost doubled it, and we need the remainder for parking. The parking is now a variance that we'll have to prove that we do provide sufficient parking, but I think we're at the point where we can't really provide any significant addition to the buffer.
Thank you.
Other questions? No? Okay. Questions from the public? If you can go to the microphone. And again, these are questions for Mr. Anderson's testimony. And if you can state your name, your address, and then you can ask your question.
Sure, Stephen Maxwell, 3 Sharon Drive. Is there 206 parking spaces for the facility?
That's correct.
Okay. And it's anticipated that's going to be a right in and right out on Asbury Avenue?
That's correct.
Do you anticipate with 206 cars trying to leave the facility onto Asbury Avenue that everybody's going to adhere to the right out turn?
Well, in all fairness, they have a traffic expert who's going to testify.
Okay.
He may give you a better quality of answer, and I assume that there's some information, and I wasn't here at the January meeting, that how things are scheduled and how there's different times of different people leaving and going and coming.
Correct.
That's what I said.
No, our next expert will go through the building use and the house of worship use, and then we'll have a traffic expert that will then tie it all together.
Yeah, okay, so maybe that.
Okay. Great, thank you.
It's this expert who would answer that.
But I just to respond briefly, Paul, there will be a mechanism within the driveway to prevent people from making a left turn, correct?
There's an island that strongly encourages you to go to the
Okay.
right. It makes it difficult for you to turn left.
All right, thank you.
Okay, other questions for this witness? If you can go to the microphone. And if you can state your name and your address, and you may ask your question.
Hi, Nick Lord, 13 Sharon Drive. I had a question with respect to this exhibit here.
Okay.
So, and it's not with respect to traffic, I'll hold that up for later.
That's A7022.
So, and this has to go with drainage. Asbury Avenue floods right here.
Why don't you put it up?
Why don't you pull it up?
So we
Oh,
can
you can
see.
probably use the exhibit that's right up here on the board too, but, okay.
So,
And
looking
speak
at
into
this
the
proposed-
microphone.
Looking at the proposed diagram, I don't know if you've taken into consideration that Asbury Avenue floods right when you have the driveway.
Right.
And I know that you've created more impervious drainage, but it floods right there. And anybody who drives down Asbury Avenue, when we have really heavy rainstorms, you can see the county. The county puts out cones to warn people of the flooded area like that. So my concern is that.
Not
Do you
your
have a
concern.
question?
Ask a question.
Sure.
Your question is,
Can
have you
address
taken that
question
into
with
account?
respect to drainage on Asbury Avenue with your new site plan?
We do have a new inlet proposed right in that location where you indicated the low point is. And that would have to be approved by Monmouth County. And so that's what we're doing with it.
So you're
We're
putting, so
reducing-
has that new inlet taken into consideration what the standing water is there during heavy rainstorms?
It doesn't really address that. It looks at the drainage area to it. But what you should understand is the drainage system on site, which does contribute to that puddle you're talking about, is going to be controlled. We discharge for like what would be a common storm that happens on a frequency of every 2 years at half of the discharge rate. I believe in this design it's even less because we're recharging just about everything to the ground.
Well,
So there's almost no runoff from this site. So it's actually improving the drainage circumstance there, and then we are providing an inlet at that point where you're talking about there being a puddle.
when the utility plan was presented, one of the comments that was made was the water will discharge to Asbury Avenue as it has in the past. So if the water does discharge to Asbury Avenue as it has in the past, will we still have standing water
You will have an improved condition from what is in the past. Now, when I
Can
said
you, can you present evidence that we will have an improved condition? Because
I have. My
just-
drainage report indicates that the drainage that has in the past come to Asbury Avenue is reduced, which is part of the ordinance requirements for the community. So we have, in the development of the site, controlled the stormwater discharging there, so it can only improve the conditions at that point.
Excuse me, you just said it would be reduced, but if we still have flooding on Asbury Avenue, wouldn't any discharge onto Asbury Avenue contribute to additional flooding?
No, it would, this is, if,
I think I can help you with this one.
thank you, Bennett.
So in the existing condition, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, everything is draining off of the property overland into the road. And then it flows along the gutter line to a drainage inlet that exists on Asbury Avenue. In the proposed condition, there is pervious pavement and there's stormwater management inlets and pipes and everything, and the stormwater that's being discharged to Asbury Avenue is going underground. So you're not having the same water running off of the site that is going to be standing water.
So when you say it's going underground into the soil beneath the,
It's going to be routed through a pipe network to the same existing inlet that it makes it to right now. It's just going to be going through pipes.
when you say to the same inlet, do you mean the stormwater discharge on Asbury Avenue? Or do you mean going into the land below the lots?
There is a significant recharge capacity where it goes into the sandy layer of soil that was dry. All the water was kept at the top because of the clay layer. So now the water will, because of the porous pavement and the detention system, will soak into the ground. So there'll be less actually going to Asbury Avenue. During the more severe storms, like the once in 100 year frequency, we will have discharge, and there is a pipe system that actually comes down to Asbury Avenue.
So if we have flooding rather frequently, wouldn't that be more than 1 in 100 years?
Yes, it's very likely to be, although I don't know
Okay.
the particulars of it.
So I don't know how you're coming up with 1 in 100 years then, if we have flooding that more frequently.
Well, first, the applicant is meeting the ordinance by reducing the discharge from the site.
Okay.
As a result of that,
So
isn't.
my questions are not.
Can I
with respect-
finish what I'm saying?
Sure.
As a result of that, he is improving the conditions of stormwater on Asbury Avenue as his part of this. If there's an additional problem there, that's really a county drainage problem. Maybe they have to build something extending way down the street. But this applicant is doing everything that's required by ordinance, and the net result that you should see when this is done is less puddling in the front if it isn't completely eliminated for some storms.
Is there a stormwater, I guess, pipe that runs along Asbury Avenue?
Yes, there is.
I think there's some confusion. It's not just running to the road, it's going into a network.
And part of the problem is that there's not enough drainage, that it backs up. If you could look at the storm source on Asbury Avenue, and there's no outflow coming through them.
I know, I live right on the corner from there.
Is there another question?
No, we could.
Is there another question?
It's a question.
Sure.
Question period. And that's his answer.
Okay.
You may not like it, but that's his
No,
answer.
that's fine. You also mentioned earlier that there was a survey conducted by the church to reduce parking. Could you expand on that a little bit more, what that survey?
I'm
or was
not sure Paul actually.
That wasn't Paul, that was
I
you?
think that was me, but our traffic engineer will be happy to go through that when he's here at the next meeting.
Yeah, I did mention it in my testimony, but it's just in passing. That is a detail that the traffic engineer will go into in detail, and you can ask him your questions then.
There's also, it's in the report if you go on file and review it.
Last question, with respect to the buffer. There was discussion about the trees and the types of trees and the number of trees. Has any study been done with respect to a combination of the buffer, the trees, as well as lighting, to see is the buffer actually going to protect the residents from noise and lighting and just the sight of the property at night? or are the, because when you look at the diagram, it's hard to tell,
Mhm.
because there's just trees sort of spotty all over the place. It's not clear if the trees are gonna be large enough, wide enough, and enough of the trees to provide a buffer.
We have a dense buffer that is in accordance with, actually, it's 1.5 times what the town requires. They want a double row, alternated evergreen trees, planted at a height that will, within a few years, be taller than any light fixture that we have. A triple row that's proposed. In addition to that, we have deciduous trees inside of that. Our light poles are 16 feet high. They are in conformance with the ordinance. There, in terms of light intensity, there is no light spill onto the neighboring properties. At the property line, there's zero light on the ground from the lights proposed. So I believe the design with the landscaping and so forth is sufficient to, you know, protect you from light glare on the site. In addition to that, we've had discussion in the past, and it has not changed, that when the church is done for the evening, when their last class or meeting is over, the lights are going to be turned off. So it's not going to be left on all night long.
Last question. There was a question raised earlier about the 45-foot buffer not being enough. And one of the responses was that you need the remainder for parking and it cannot provide any more buffer for the public. What if the building size was reduced? Would that provide you additional parking and buffer? Or is that a question to be brought up later?
I'll just say the buffer exceeds the ordinance requirement, so we're already going above and beyond. So we don't have a duty, or we're not seeking relief to make the buffer any larger. We are required a 25-foot buffer, and we're giving a 45-foot buffer.
Well, so, but can you answer this question? Because you brought up the comment that we need the remainder of the parking and cannot provide any more for the public based upon the site requirements. If the building size was reduced, can that give you an additional buffer and less parking?
This is not relevant. We're not going to reduce the building size. We comply. There's no FAR issue. There's no impervious cover issue. So we will not be reducing the building size.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, are there other questions from the public for Mr. Anderson? If you can state your name and your address.
Terry Maxwell, 3 Sharon Drive,
You want to
directly along the, so my concern is a buffer, my entire backyard.
Sure.
When I looked at the plans the other day, it did say 25. Was this new?
25 is the required. So the
Okay.
required line is shown, and then the actual curb line is shown as a farther distance.
Okay, so from my yard back, it's 45. At that 45 feet buffer, is that where you will start planting trees?
No, so from your property line to the curb line on the property is 45 feet.
And what will be there?
Within between the let me pull up.
Because
We're going to pull up the plan with the landscaping so you can see it. So you can see the plantings are in the buffer area in order to screen it.
it's still very confusing.
If you can use the microphone.
My house is here, right here. My house is here. Okay. And when I sit on my patio, the 25 feet, I could probably say hi to parishioners as they come in. So my concern is the buffer. I know it's 45 feet, but what will be, then what?
So this triple row here, these are evergreen trees.
Okay.
Those are triple row of evergreen trees. You can see how they're staggered so that the gaps between them are filled in by the one behind it.
Okay.
So we have a triple row of evergreen trees. Then we have deciduous trees. That will become higher and higher canopy, and then you have some shrubs, and then you have the curb.
So there will be no fence.
No, there's a fence right here.
So there's a fence first, then the trees.
Correct.
So that I will be looking at a fence, correct? Would you say that when I sit in my yard, I'll be looking at a fence versus looking at a nicer buffer?
You'll see the buffer sticking above it for that, yeah.
Well, but I'll be looking at a fence. Can you tell me what kind of fence that would be?
It has to, it's, in that area, it'll be 6 feet high, and it'll be transparent enough where you can see through it like a picket fence of some type.
Okay, so they're really, I wouldn't call that a buffer. Would you say that is a buffer? Because, or what do you consider a buffer? Wouldn't that be something where you can't see the other side? What, like if I have a buffer between me and my neighbor, I can't see what's going on in their yard.
I can pull up the ordinance definition of a buffer.
Okay.
If you'd like, because I believe the ordinance.
They meet the ordinance requirement of a buffer.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've established in our ordinance what a buffer needs to be.
Now,
compliant
as
with.
stated, would you say?
Can I answer you?
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
In our ordinance, it says how big a buffer has to be, how wide, and what it must consist of. They meet that requirement and then some.
But would you say that this land, as said by the planner previously, should fit the character of the neighborhood?
This is a
Correct?
different
Does that fit the character of the neighborhood?
This is not, he's not a planner.
I am.
He is. He is our planner as well, but.
But I'm only doing engineering right now.
But no, this is we're seeking different relief than the other application.
All right,
Totally
but
different relief.
it's still about character, the neighborhood.
It's not.
It's not.
Now,
Yeah, I agree.
so I have some other questions. Who qualified the removal of the trees?
It will be the board planner, Jim Higgins, will go and do a site walk. We haven't done that yet.
Okay. All right, and then the rest is, I guess, that, because are you aware that most people do not follow right turn only out of a?
Again,
not the traffic
we-
engineer.
Okay, that's
you
traffic.
question the traffic engineer based on that.
Okay.
You'll have an opportunity, and I think
I
everybody
know.
knows this. Ask
Okay.
each witness a question, and then at the end of their case, you can come up and talk to the board and tell them anything you want.
Any other questions from the public? And if you can state your name and your address. And remember questions for his testimony.
I'm Michelle. I'm an adjacent property owner. I'm protected under Daniel's law, so unless you want to redact it, I could tell you my address privately. When you make the minutes, I don't know what the preference is.
That's okay. It's on TV,
You're good.
So just don't say.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't even know which one's up. The 25, well, let me say, because you're the engineer and the planner.
No, he's testifying only as the
That's
engineer.
what I'm saying, but now, with no landscape architect, do I ask you landscape related questions
You can
at
ask
this
him
time?
landscape related questions up to time.
So the buffer, I know it was increased, and I know I can't say my comments right now, but, and I'm sorry I'm sick, well, and the air quality. Is it this one? So if you
A5,
go
yes.
here, if everybody can hear me, you increased here, but then it didn't increase here, it still went double, and on 2801's border, it went back down to double, and I didn't know if there was a specific reason for that.
It was double to begin with. What we did was we did not increase the number in the front portion after the jog in the sideline. That has not changed. The location of the driveway there has not changed, and in fact, the buffer is probably more than 45 feet in that particular point.
No, but the question was the reason is just because there's so much grass there, that's why it wasn't? I'm just, like, if there was no reason, or if the reason was because there's some large deciduous trees that are also being taken down, and I understand that some of that has to happen. But I just didn't know if it was considered at all to go from 3 and keep it then. If you're going to increase the volume of visual and evergreen buffer visually between the neighbors for, I would say maybe 90% of the surrounding properties, were it not to to be able to go that last maybe 20 feet on both sides. Where it was increased for so many of the other neighbors.
But we do have some space there. We could probably add some additional trees, but we already have a significant number of buffer trees. I don't know that it's necessary there. We do have a nice space there in that, and then the house is farther away from that property line also.
No, I understand that, and there's also a shrubbery row there also.
Yeah.
And I know I can't testify, so.
I know.
Yeah, it's
Not yet.
It's for sound and stuff and aroma from the
Sure.
That's the reason for the question. The other, this pole here.
Yes.
I have it written down the number, but the easternmost, the property has 3 traffic poles on it. Utility poles that I believe all 3 are going to be moved backward, more northern, right? Is there? I don't believe you have the final say, but that goes to the utility company.
Yeah, I can show a location, but they're going to put it where they want.
When you plan your proposed, and I know you don't have final say, but has it been addressed where if the pole that's here gets moved northern, like, I don't know, inland of the plan, the angle then that the wires would be moved at? So the wires, as opposed to maybe running at exactly parallel to sidewalk, may end up being at a slightly different angle, and whether the angle of the wires now going from the pole that's over here will then begin interfering with existing landscaping on the adjacent property. Has that been explored at all?
It has not, and quite honestly, I don't think that I have any part in that decision-making role. I think the power company will determine where they put it, and I don't think that they'll put their main lines over a private property unless they have an easement. They'll put service lines into the property, but they won't put that over the property line. But that's entirely their decision, not mine.
In your experience, and if you can't say it, that's fine, but do you believe it would generally move it grossly out of line of the other existing poles that are along a main corridor like that?
No, we're actually, I think we have a small widening in here to match the rest of the roadway width in that area. So I think it's probably not going to be a significant change.
Like a matter of like a few feet, would you think?
Well, it might be more than a few feet, but I don't think it'll be a radical change that's going to create issues that you're concerned with.
The utility company has their own design team and set of engineers, and they make the determination. It might not just be the poles that are in front of this property. If the wires are on too sharp of an angle, they might have to move the next pole down the line a little bit. It's up to them how they do that, and like Paul said, it's not typical for them to have their wires extending over private property.
But so the likelihood of them like decreasing over, I can't have to phrase it as a question, I'm sorry. Like, it's more just with other trees being taken down in the area that additional ones on my property wouldn't have to come down also, was just the concern I was asking. That it would be moving over. So it's not likely?
I can't say for what the utility company is going to do, but I would suspect that if they're going to impact your private property, they would notify you and discuss that with you.
I guess I off the top of my head, because even with my reading glasses I can't see it. I think it was something like there's 205 Norway spruces as the buffer, and then other ones there. Was there any consideration to diversify the species of evergreens that are going to be surrounding it and throughout the property?
Our township planner will review the final landscape plan and make that decision and determination whether or not some of the species have to be changed. And he's more experienced and more adept in that than I am, for sure.
And that has been the plan since the first meeting.
Right.
We've talked about that, and changing the species now is they're just placeholders.
Okay.
Norway spruce is a very nice tree, but 205 of them
Right,
will
and Jim,
probably get changed.
and Jim in general recommends several different species.
That
case
in
one
the
gets-
event of
in
blight,
case one
others-
gets diseased
Right.
or something like that.
Right.
And the applicants in all these types of site plans have a bonding issue of retaining the site plan, and trees that are, you die have to be replaced. There's bonding, there's a lot of other stuff to protect the town, so the site plan remains as approved for many years.
The other question I have is, the conditional use, portion says that the building, within the residential area religious is not 35 feet above grade. I understand the building has two fronts. The northern front of the building,
Well, he didn't testify to any of it.
so we're not getting, that's not, or did we get to that at the architect part, or then where would I ask that?
Well, I probably testified to building height in the first meeting, and that has not changed.
Well, we
Is
have
it-
an elevation plan now, which we didn't have
Well,
previously.
the architect can go
That's
over
the
the
architect.
elevation.
Okay,
plan.
so get to that later?
Yeah.
But I don't
The
think we
only
have.
reason they need a D3, which is a conditional use variance, is they don't meet the depth required because of the shape of this lot.
That's the only thing.
It's the only thing they don't meet.
We meet all the other requirements.
I understand, well, visually.
Per the ordinance requirements, we meet it. We meet everything.
Okay, so the ordinance is 35 feet, and I understand that. The 2 stories, 35 feet. The practical usage front of the building is the parking lot side of the building, the north side of the building, correct? Is that,
If
that's
you-
where the,
That's where the main entrance is, yes, correct.
okay. The southern side of the building is the most visibly to neighbors and passers-by or visitors to the community. That side from the sidewalk, unless I'm misunderstanding this, we have just, and I understand there's this here, but we have just a sidewalk, then 37 feet from this side. It's 35 from here, but it's 37 from this side straight up with no front planting. I didn't know if it was considered, to add any decorative planting to the front of the building.
I think that that's a more appropriate question for once you see the elevations and we have someone testify as to the
And
elevations.
who's gonna do that, the architect?
Our architect.
And there's no landscape architect that could testify to any of this,
No.
that's one of the variance reliefs you're requesting?
That's a
I
bulk
prepared the plan.
variance,
I'll ask.
not a,
Yeah, it's not a
Variance.
conditional use variance.
not a
So
use
that's-
variance.
I asked that question when? I don't wanna
The
ask it in the wrong
landscaping
place.
plan is presented, I guess.
Well, we're presenting the landscape.
This,
That's my whole.
this is it, Mark.
Go
My office prepared the landscape plan. We do have a sidewalk right up against the building. We do have the trees out in front. We can add some additional shrubs along the front roadway, but not necessarily right up against the building. I don't wanna pull the roadway down towards Asbury Avenue. I wanna keep it where it is. And I think that when you see the elevation of that side of the building, you'll think that it's an attractive front of the building that you can look at, and the buffering that we have with the 4 deciduous trees and other small flowering trees will be enough to highlight the front yard. It's okay.
That's subjective.
Yeah.
The other part, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place either, because again, the signage, I don't know if that's you, building signage, is that
That's
later?
gonna be the architect. So the architect's gonna walk us through the building use, what the building's gonna look like, what's gonna be in the building, and the sign, any signage or any decorative features of the building.
Fencing, that's it.
That's this guy.
This is me.
Okay, I know there were questions last meeting, and I don't think we still have, I believe, the letter said there's a variance request regarding fencing, is that still the case?
No, we're good.
If
It,
there,
it was requested out of an abundance of caution. When I do my notices, I put in whatever I think might pop up, but we do not need any variance right now for the fence.
okay, is this still a planned fence along?
No.
the-
No.
That was the move.
So we had a fence there because a basin was gonna be there. The basin has been removed. So, planting
So
fence.
this fence is gone.
That's
Yes.
correct.
And then this fence is all 6 feet?
No,
Yeah.
Then it turns to 4.
It's gonna be 4 feet there,
After that's 4 going to the
and then
front.
I go 4,
Yes.
this is all 4 feet,
Mm-hmm.
and that's because it counts as a,
That's
That's
the
because of
ordinance.
the ordinance. We're following the ordinance dictates how tall you can put a fence and where. So it's allowed to be 6 feet where it's 6 feet, and it's allowed to be 4 feet where it's 4 feet.
Is that because it's a side yard?
Yeah,
Yes, it has
it's
to
in
be
front of the
fixed.
building, has to be a lesser height.
So,
From the front face of the building
yeah.
forward.
So I'm sorry, this one's still 4?
Yeah.
Front of the building.
Yeah.
So this is
It-
gonna be a 4-foot fence, and we still haven't decided on a final design of the fence?
So they comply with the ordinance.
It just has to be transparent enough. It can't be a solid fence.
I know, but the last meeting, it was also, they would have been discussed chain link, and then the township said no
They
chain
don't-
link.
We will not do
We're
chain link.
talking about, like a,
Like a picket fence.
Like,
the
like an
metal type
like
style or
aluminum,
vinyl or
like
something.
aluminum picket fence, yes.
It has to be spacing in between of a minimum of like 4 or 5 inches, I think.
Yes.
But we're definitely at 4 feet here, 4 feet there, that was.
The town required.
No, last time it was, we weren't sure, so that's definitely where
Do
we're at.
that.
Okay. So let's double check that.
While you double check, is the idea to keep the fence consistent along that neighboring property? Am I looking at that map right? That's where it juts towards the building and then out to the street.
Yeah, it's just from that corner down. Yeah. So I just wanted to transition. I could have transitioned from the other corner and kept it 6 the other way, but you know, it was a flip of a coin, really. And you're right. I think that the consistent along the frontage of that lot at 4 feet is you know, maybe the reason the better choice.
If the neighbor thought, hey, it would be great to have 6 foot on that one side, would you be open?
If
to
they
that?
want 6 here, fine. It's still compliant with the ordinance, and we could do that.
Yeah, I feel like it's the same distance from the
This is
Yeah.
one
front.
of the tightest spots. I mean, and I understand the 25 goes here, obviously this is my property.
We don't know. But yeah, so if you wanted to make that change, there's no objection to that. I mean,
This is the 25, you know, and then, right, I'm correct, like about here. And then here, and I know that in theory it's 45, and it's not
Mhm.
correct. But it's one of the smallest buffers there,
Mhm.
areas, so that 6-foot buffer
How would
fence.
you describe that corner for me, in terms of the engineer?
that would be the
Northwest corner.
that
two
would
sides on one
that
side.
actually it's actually the southeast sideline corner. You might want to say it's the corner of lot 73, which is the adjacent lot.
So a 6-foot fence, which is compliant. Or
Correct.
do you need a
Correct. In the area they're requesting it would still be compliant.
variance? So you'll move, that would, you would move that up. Okay. Good.
And I believe there's just a grading change here. Is that you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It is.
There's a grading change here where it goes slightly downhill. I believe it only decreases about a foot, which is very, very minor, but I believe that grading is resulting in possibly the removal of a few additional live trees. If that could be
Just very
double
quickly
checked.
about the trees. Jim is gonna walk the site.
No,
So
no,
if
I
Jim goes and says, this tree is alive, we love it, save it, it will be saved.
So there is and that to what Amanda is saying. If we get out to the field and I have a nice flat grade, right, and there's a beautiful oak tree behind it that Jim says we want to save, then maybe we could make it steeper and get up to grade and save
So
the
that's
oak tree. But that is something that is done in the field. But that's something that would be done in the field, and that's part of the minor changes that would be done with the board's planner in the field.
Sorry.
land use you said is Barbara Gibson, right? Isn't it next?
So well, given the time, I don't think we're getting to him tonight, but we have an architect, he's gonna talk about the building use, what the building's gonna look like and all of that. Then we're gonna have a traffic engineer who's gonna talk about the traffic impacts of the driveway, his study on parking, and then Paul will return again to tie it all together with planning testimony.
Okay. This is, and they don't know this is even a question it's probably like a shot in the dark. With this whole, I know there's 36 possibly trees. has it ever been done, has it ever been considered, where as opposed to you're then dropping into a tree fund, you then, if a neighbor agrees, planting those trees nearby where they had previously existed.
I don't think that's permitted by ordinance.
It's never been.
It's not permitted by ordinance.
I didn't think so, but it was just something that I thought of, with the tree farm, that was all. I don't believe I have any more questions, so thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? And I guess
Could
just
you go over?
just restate your name
I'm
and
sorry,
address.
Nick Lord, 13 Sharon Drive. Could you go over what the next experts are going to be talking about? Because we sort of went over. You mentioned several of them.
Yes, we have several experts, and they all have submitted some sort of report or plan that's on file with the park department. So next we're going to have Robert Dooley, who's our architect. He's going to walk you through the building use, what the building's going to look like, and the elevation, so to speak. He'll also discuss heights. Then we're going to have Lee Klein. He's our traffic engineer. He's going to discuss the traffic report that he did, the parking study that he accomplished, and the driveway. And then Paul is also our professional planner because he's licensed in the state of New Jersey, and he is going to put on the proofs for the D3. Here we're seeking a D3 for failure to meet one conditional use standard, which is failure to meet the minimum lot depth. That's the only D3 portion of this. And then we have a couple of C variances that he will also be testifying to.
Okay. I didn't hear lighting mentioned.
Paul, in his
Is
plan.
that now or is that later?
Well, it is, and I mentioned in the question to answer to one of the questions just previously is that our lighting plan is completely compliant. It has 16-foot high poles. It might have been you that I.
It was.
That I.
Yeah. So could you? So what?
Go ahead.
As a resident, I'm concerned about the ambient lighting up in the sky, draining over or going over into the residence area. That could be alleviated with respect to trees and or more down different types of lighting.
These are downward focused lights.
Okay.
Night sky compliant.
Has any study been done to see how much leakage of lighting gets over into the residence from this?
There's a lighting plan in the set that shows the spread of what lighting intensity it will be at each point. And at the property line, there is no light projected from these lights onto your property.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If you can state your name and your address.
My name is Deborah Pineda, 30 Blair Court. I just have two questions. With the buffer, right, with these plants right here, how tall will they be when they're planted? And once they're full grown, like how many years will it take for them to be full grown? And how tall will they be once they're full grown?
Well, there, as we mentioned just before, is there might be some substituted species by the board's planner. All right, but we're currently have on the plan Norway spruce planted at 6 to 10 foot high. Okay. They grow when properly planted approximately 2 feet a year, and they'll a Norway spruce can be 30 feet high, and have plenty of height, and the spacing that we have them set at is a spacing where the lower branches will grow together and it'll be almost like a solid wall.
Okay. And then I have a question about lighting. Can I ask that as well?
Sure.
Okay. With the lighting, where will the lighting be in the back exactly? Because I'm over here.
Okay. Give me a moment. So the nearest lights to your property are in these planted islands here. So you'll have a 24-foot wide driveway and then a 25-foot minimum buffer over there. So they're approximately 50 feet away from your property line. And they're just like in amongst these planted trees. There's a fixture in each one of them.
Right. And what are the times and hours of operation of the church, and how long will these lights be?
Next witness.
The next witness will discuss the operational hours.
Next witness, but the lights will not be on all night.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a church. They're
right,
not.
I know, but in the winter it's dark at 4:30.
And yes, so they might be on for 4:30, and at the last class gets out at 8 o'clock, we'll shut them off at 8 o'clock, last person out the door, shut them off.
And then there will be security lighting to the
Yeah,
extent
Or
necessary.
a lesser extent, and they wouldn't be the exterior of the parking lot, they'd be immediate.
Okay, and if you can restate your name and your address.
Terry Maxwell, 3 Sharon Drive. I have a question on the lighting. When I read on the plans, it said that the lights were on dusk till dawn. So, are they not gonna be on dusk till dawn then, those parking lot lights? They will be off after an event ends?
They can be shut off, and what we're saying is that our intention is to shut them off.
Okay, well, that's,
Or
that,
a portion of them that, you know, so that you can have site security, but, you know, around the building there's lights, so somebody's trying to get in, you can see them.
sure, but, I mean, you know, the higher parking lot lights that shine down.
The ones
will
in
not-
the exterior of the parking lot obviously are not necessary, like the ones that the last person was asking about is way back here.
Okay.
There's really no reason for those to be on after shutdown.
Well, why is this a different color here? Is that the porous?
It's a plotting error.
Oh, okay, oh, all right. So are there these lights there?
What was your answer? For the color?
It's a plotting error.
Oh.
I didn't know if it meant.
A plotting error, yes, okay.
You almost got away with it.
I did.
That was very close.
Sorry. The teacher and me noticing the details.
Yeah, you did. You caught me.
Are the lights in this? I was confused when I did look, so is that where these are?
Those are all planted islands. There's one light in here. There's one intermediate in between spaces, like in this area, and then there's the next one is in the next planted island way over here.
So they're 16 feet.
16 feet high. Correct.
Okay. Now, my last question, I did look at the lighting numbers, although it was not quite sure, but it did show a little overflow in my yard.
Well, I got it. Please.
Oh, I guess, that's not
That's-
really
that's-
my yard,
Your yard starts here. You see that? That's a
Yeah.
0.
Okay.
Zero.
It is, okay.
Okay.
Close enough, but
Good.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the public?
Can I just say something regarding the lighting? So one of it's in our report that the parking lot illuminance, and this is right from the ordinance, should be reduced to 50% upon the close of the building, provided a minimum of 0.2 foot candles is maintained. There was discussion about certain light fixtures being shut off entirely and maybe some staying on so that you can get the security lighting. I don't think we can figure that out exactly right now, which ones have to be shut off, but maybe like a condition of approval would be that a new plan would be submitted for that overnight security lighting.
Yes.
To maintain that.
Not a problem.
That's a reasonable request.
Okay. If you can come to the microphone and state your name and your address.
Hi, Darlene Sandlin, 11 Sharon Drive. So a couple of my questions might be for you, or they might be for when Jim comes with the tree analysis.
So just so you know, Jim is not gonna do that here. Jim is not gonna analyze the trees here. If we get
I understand he's not going to do it here, but he has to do the study before it can be.
No, he's gonna do it during construction. When if the plan is approved and they line everything up and show him where the survey is and where the markers are and everything, he will then go out into the field.
Oh, so once everything has been
Approved.
cleared.
No, before clearance.
Before they clear it.
But they will mark the property where the building's gonna go and whatnot, and he will go actually out to the field and do all this.
It's done as like a pre-construction.
Right, that's the word, thank you.
Okay, so he'll check the trees before it's cleared, but after it's approved.
Correct. So typically in all these cases, after something is approved, there's a pre-construction meeting with the town, you meet the professionals, and you kind of go over logistics. It will all be done in that process.
Okay. Yeah, I've built the site, so I understand that part. I just didn't clear any trees because I wanted
We're not
to.
going to be clearing any trees.
Yeah.
Until Jim walks through with us.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, that answers one of my questions. So I'm gonna go back to the lighting, because I am concerned about it also, since I am a next door neighbor. The down lighting that you're talking about, you're saying that the spread doesn't go on to the neighboring yards, I understand that. I think one of the questions that Nick asked that I was also concerned about is the ambient lighting. So even if a light is shining down onto the ground, I understand there is an area that it falls on. What about the light that it gives out? The ambient light. Has there been any kind of a lighting study of the ambient light, or is that included on the plan that I can read that I could actually understand since I'm not a lighting engineer?
Well, you don't actually see the lighting element, the bulb itself, which
Well, I
so you're
understand
not.
that. I
So it's like
understand
if you see one of these like acorn-shaped fixtures and like you know you see along the street,
Mhm.
that's going to have lighting that just you can see it from a half mile away.
Mhm.
Our fixtures are up here. It's a shell, and then there's a light in it,
Mhm.
and it shines down only.
Mhm. I understand that.
So
I mean, I have a kitchen with hi-hat lights, and they shine down, and the whole kitchen lights up. I'm talking about the ambient light that is given off. Because it's 16 feet up in the air, it's not a spotlight like a laser that shines down the ground. It provides light, which is why you only have certain number of lights in a parking lot, because there's ambient light that it gives off.
right, and that throw, what they call the throw of the light, how far it goes horizontally, is in the model that's on our lighting plan, and that's how they determine what the intensity with the overlapping ambient light, as you're calling it, at various points, and eventually it gets to zero. And the way it's been designed is at the property line, it's zero.
So if I'm standing at my property line and your lights are on the parking lot, I will not see them?
You'll see the parking lot
That's my
light.
point.
Right.
That's my
If
point.
you're standing in the parking lot.
That's the ambient light that I'm talking about.
Okay.
It's not like it goes from your line to my line and goes from light enough to light the parking lot to darkness, which is what I see now.
Right. Yes.
I think that's the concern that we're talking about. It's not, it's not the area of ground that the light hits. It's the ambient light that is thrown out, that beyond that point, it's darkness.
Well, when the trees are initially planted at 10 feet high, and the lights are at 16, you will see them until the trees are larger, depending on the angle that you're looking at. Now, if you're in your second floor, if you're in the second floor of a house and you're looking down, you will see them too, until the lights are turned off for the evening.
And then what about the security lights? Is that on the plan? Like how much light?
That's what the board's engineer was just talking about, is they would want to see a plan that shows which lights will be left on the security purposes.
And how much ambient light? Is that what part of the,
Yeah, so the ordinance requires that there is security lighting. And it requires that the lights should be dimmed to 50% when the church closes. And it has to maintain a minimum illumination in the parking lot for security purposes. So the request that I had was that a plan be submitted which indicates exactly which lights would remain on in order to achieve that. And because the previous neighbor that just came up, you know, there was discussion about turning off some of the lights that are closer to the property lines. So that's where it has to be determined. But ultimately, they are complying with the ordinance.
And technically, by turning off some completely around the outside, it's probably, you know, not providing all of the security lighting that the town ordinance requires. So I think that's probably why the board engineer wants to see it, so that everybody understands that maybe the exterior parts of the parking lot are not going to be lit in accordance with the lighting standards, mostly because of the sensitivity of the neighboring properties.
okay, so we have to decide between the safety of our neighborhood versus the light pollution. is basically what we have to decide, or what the board needs to decide. Because if it's dark and there are people coming and going, and EV spots there that are probably going to require full lighting, we have to decide if it's safer to have darkness, which is preferable visually, and for our quality of life, or light pollution. That's, is that what we have to decide?
I think there was some discussion at the prior meeting that the EV facilities are not gonna be operating, well, 24 hours, are they?
Correct.
That's correct.
Yes, at the last hearing, there was a lot about the EV stations we're putting in because it's required. We're not doing it to
make money or
to market them.
To market it. So when the church is closed, they're closed.
Yes.
So there won't be somebody at night.
Is that,
Using that.
is that, once that is determined, is that, is there any way of, in the future, knowing that it's going to continue to?
Okay, whatever is approved, which would be an inclusion as part of the approval that EV stations have to close when the church closes, for instance, okay?
Okay.
That is a permanent part of the determination of the board.
Okay.
It's part of the resolution.
Okay.
And the applicant has to comply. If the applicant doesn't comply, then they can be cited for zoning violations.
And ultimately, it's a state mandate. The state mandate supersedes anything locally, so whatever the state mandate is. Mr. Anderson, are you proposing live EVSE or make ready?
We were talking live.
Live, because the standard is that they are not required to put EVSE in. They can put make ready in, which means basically put the conduit and everything ready, and they can light it up after. But they're going above and beyond what they're required to do.
Yeah.
Residential developments have to put in live. That's a difference. Any non-residential, they only have to make ready.
There was also an earlier version of the plan had more EV spaces because they can take credit for the EV spaces to reduce their parking requirement. But after discussion by the public and in a meeting between the professionals, it was, we've determined that it was better to limit the number of EV spaces and reduce that parking demand, reduce the amount of parking that they were taking credit for, in order to alleviate the concerns.
So this application goes back to January when you first testified,
Yes.
Okay, just one thing. The DCA put out something called a frequently asked questions memo about EVSCs, clarifying. I joked that half of the questions were from me. Ben knows they were. But anyway, one of the items that came from this is that the credits can only be taken on the EVSE, the EV spaces that are required by statute. So in essence, if I'm required to put 20 in, but I put 30, I only get credit for the 20. 10 is above and beyond. You only can get that's how it's written. Like the credit is based on what's required by statute.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, now I'm distracted. Okay. That is for later. Oh, back to the EV thing, because this kind of concerned me with your answer to the EV, this fire regulation, I think, that you brought up. And you had made a comment like the EV spots are gonna be put, and you motioned over here, where.
They're marked on the plan. He can show them. They're staggered throughout the parking lot.
Well, that's all right. I can ask the question without that. Well, maybe I can. It's hard. Yeah.
So we have two here. Two here, two there, and then two there.
Okay, so the fire.
They're remote
From the building. So my concern as a neighbor, even though I'm on the other side, so I don't have to worry about it, but I think there are neighbors here that might be concerned about the whole EV fire thing. It might be far from your building, but it's not necessarily far from the neighbor's building.
No, that's right.
So I agree with the fire, you know, having the fire thing go out. It's just something, your point of view is a little different than ours, because you're concerned about this, which I understand.
I'm concerned about the entire project. If the fire chief comes up with a safety concern, we're going to address it.
Okay. Well,
And just so you know, they used to all be next to the building, and the public didn't like that, so that's why we staggered them. So, if you wanted to put them back, we'll put them back.
well,
Let's see what the next question is. Next, do you
yeah,
have
that's
another
not,
question?
I'm not trying
Yeah.
to, you
I'm
know,
just noting that
raise
that
your
was
hackles
something
like
that
this at me,
was,
but,
that was
you
a
know.
revision made in response to public commentary.
I understand, because I understand, but you don't have to get. Okay, so for the drainage and the trees, I was going to wait, thinking that the walkthrough was gonna happen maybe before the whole site was open, but since that's not happening, I've read some articles about how.
Now you're testifying, which you'll have a chance to do later.
I'm
Just ask
I'm
your
trying
question.
to.
Yeah, but you have to just ask a question for it.
In your drainage plan, did you consider not just the drainage going through the silt, but the absorption that the existing trees absorb?
Yes. Yes, there's factors in drainage calculations, in the programs that we use that indicates the condition, the surface condition of the site. This is considered a woods in good condition, which indicates all of the trees and their ability to utilize rainfall that comes down, in addition to roughness coefficients on the surface for how fast the water runs in any particular direction.
Okay.
So yes.
Okay. Because it just surprises me that even a porous parking lot and building can absorb more water.
Okay,
than
now you testify.
I'm just.
That's
Yeah.
not a question.
Yeah.
Okay. I wrote these quickly. Put that. Next person. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you.
Any other questions from the public? And if you can state your name and your address.
Hi, I'm Joe Torsha, 2801 Asbury Ave. So
Okay, and you're,
directly west of the site.
and you're,
So
please make sure you have questions.
yeah, I do.
Okay.
Okay, so number one, the curb cut. How far from the west property line will the curb cut be? Because I know it's not going to be in the center third anymore.
Correct.
So like from the actual property line to the entrance.
Yes, so I believe I testified it was 73 feet to the center line. So
Center
that
line is like the middle of
the middle of the driveway as opposed to the edge of the driveway. So it's probably 60 feet from the curb line on the west side of the driveway to the property line, but there is a slanted property line there, so it tapers. You know, so you have a driveway that's straight and this goes out like this. You know, so
in the, around 60 something.
around, so yes, that's what I'm saying, just
Okay.
around 60 feet.
Gotcha. Okay, so, and the 45-foot buffer, that is not for the west border? Is that only for, or I just don't understand, like.
It's, the 45-foot buffer was added to the eastern side of the property.
Okay.
The buffer on the western side of the property had some additional tree planting, but was not changed, graphically, or the curbs weren't moved.
Okay, so 25-foot buffer from the western border.
Well, it exceeds that, but yeah, 25, yeah, but we didn't change it from the last submission.
Okay. Okay, so also, if, why would a berm not be considered, or maybe not be part of the plan, if it could not eliminate, but alleviate, like, noise, visual, and runoff, all those types of problems, like, so, because I mean, I think there's precedent for berms being built around. When I say berm, I mean, like, you know, I guess literally just a hill of soil that then the trees would be planted on top of.
It's possible, but towards the property that you towards the west side, you're going downhill, so you have a limited ability to put a berm there.
There's also the ordinance. There's an ordinance requirement that you're not allowed to change grade by more than 2 feet on site, and the installation of a berm does exactly that. So that the township ordinance really kind of does not encourage berms.
I see. Okay. And just the trash dumpster, do we know, or is this the right time to ask? Like,
Sure.
What time of day would that be emptied, or is it like a couple times a week? Is there going to be that loud metal bang at like 5 a.m.? A couple times a week, or
I don't know that we know that answer.
Okay.
Yeah, but we do usually condition approval that usually has to be during weekdays. Although we have to find out what they do during the weekends, but not before 7 a.m. in the morning and things like that. We can't condition some of the timing of that, because they deal with a private party.
Yeah, I understand you can't give me like an exact time.
No,
of the day,
but we usually, I think we say, 7 a.m. to?
I think it was 8.
I think it was last time we had something like that, it was like after 8 a.m.
After 8 a.m.
So it would be, dumpsters, 8 a.m.
Before 5 p.m.
to 5 p.m. But we can't really do Monday through Friday on something like this, but, I don't know. Maybe we'll have testimony as to when they plan on meeting the dumpster issue. But we can do an 8 to 5 situation so that we don't have a 6 in the morning disturbance.
So that could be put into
That would be part of the approval, that would be a
Gotcha.
condition.
Okay.
And then they have a contract with a private party guy, they can't come early.
You think you can get my recycling guy to get on board with that, or?
I don't know. We've done that there before. Because they're adjacent to residential areas, so.
Township truck.
The township
I know.
comes early, but at least they're taking
I think I should have
Okay.
my guy comes
Okay.
before
So,
I can even
and
get
is
out.
it? I don't know if you could tell me this now. Just last question, I guess.
6 a.m.
The trash dumpster would be. Like, why can't it be closer to the building? Now I understand it can't be. Think about your. No, I'm just kidding. Why? In other words, like,
I think the leg's pulled out. It's not vertical anymore.
Oh, don't let the mic go. Yeah.
There you go, perfect. All right.
So the trash dumpster can't, because I know it was like being moved around at the last meeting months and months ago, and it was like in front of someone's property, and they didn't like that, and now it's kind of closer to mine or to ours, and so I guess maybe can that be moved closer to the actual House of Worship building, or does it have to remain on the peripheral? And also, if so, is it because they would expect it to be emitting lots of odor? I don't mean it. I'm not trying to be facetious, but really, because I don't know how far it's going to be from my property line, right where I have a swing set right there, like where I think it's going to be going. And
Well, do you see where it is on the plan, right there?
Yeah, it's right by the garage.
On the opposite side of the garage. So it's if your house is the house down on the right here, so it's on the opposite side of the garage for you. We put it on the opposite side of the garage to be farther away from your home. Okay. And you see this dimension here? This is 50 feet to this garage. So it's going to be more like 70 feet from your property line to the dumpster, which is on the opposite side of the garage. So we thought, so that's how we thought it was a good location that balanced distance from your property and distance from this building.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the public? Okay, and we are at 103 minutes for one expert, so I think that we will conclude tonight.
I just have one more quick question. And I'm not sure if it's for you. Will there be an outdoor PA system?
It's not for me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Steinberg, I believe this is the same, continue to December 19th without notice.
Back because she told me that it's full on the 19th.
Oh, okay,
She stepped out from
okay.
It did sound like the applicant before us would likely not proceed on the
But she
19th.
didn't count it.
Okay.
There's 4 others on already. But let her come back to that. I don't think that's are all your available? I think it's available the 19th?
I believe the 19th good? 19th is good.
It is, I have shoulder surgery on the 10th, so I'll probably need a driver, which I have one at home, so.
But you're finished. For this day.
Yeah, I can read the transcript for my planning testimony.
Yeah, I mean, just saying, if you can't make it.
Yeah.
Colleen, you're needed to the front of the room.
I can read transcript for prior to plan.
Colleen, you don't want to carry to the 19th, let's do it. I'm not talking about the application, it's just here. That would be the 5th one. I don't think that's coming off. You want to carry it, but we don't know.
Do we carry without notice and do the same, give the next
Well,
date of January 6th?
then again, 2 of those can go off.
I don't think they will.
Okay, complicated?
No.
I would very much
So,
appreciate
why don't
if we
carry
could
it to
be
the
on
ninth,
this.
carry it to the 19th, even if you just get one of the witnesses through that night, and take 45 minutes.
I'm supposed to be here on the 19th for another application.
Oh, you gonna be short on that at least? You testimony
This is
should-
a very short, very short.
Okay.
So carry to December 19th, 7:00 p.m. without notice.
No further notice, it'll be to the 19th. You wanna call the day before in case something changes. before the time you do it.
Okay. And a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Any opposed?
So